morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this October 10th, 2023. Tonight, back by popular demand, we have Psychic Seduction Part 2. We never really finished half of what we wanted to talk about last time, and we've been on a kind of a roll this season. So we talked about it, and we thought it would be good to do our next open date with a part 2. So here you have it. So we're going to continue on with the discussion from 2 weeks ago and kind of debrief from last week's episode with Regan Forston. And then if we finish up, we can move right into open lines, open topics. Whatever's on your mind, you can call into the show. We're going to have fun tonight. Don't go away. Everybody, I am very happy to be with you here tonight. I really enjoy Vestiges Tuesdays, and I think we're going to have a good discussion, as is typically the case. This is a continuation, as I said, of 2 weeks ago, where we sort of ran out of time because I'm long-winded, and those conversations and those topics and those stories kind of just take me away. And but I think everything needed to be said that was said. And now we have more of a foundation upon which to build tonight's topic. Tonight's, I guess, continuation of the topic. And we're also going to...
You're just being thorough.
I guess so. Yeah, I have to be, because you'd have to be very clear with these kinds of...
It's a brain twister, some of the subject matter. So
it really is. Esotericism doesn't come easy. It's not esoteric... It's not called esoteric for nothing.
Reason, yeah.
But yeah, we're going to even debrief a little bit from Regan Forston, and we're going to talk a little bit about some thoughts and ideas I have about that. And then, of course, finally getting to all your questions. Okay, so this is going to operate like a pseudo open lines, open topics tonight. Okay, so we're going to start off with our usual segment where we do questions from the ether. Then we're going to jump right in to a bit of the continuation and finishing up thoughts and kind of refresh our memories from what we discussed 2 weeks ago. And then I'm going to open the lines and we'll look at the chat and we'll see what thoughts or questions or concerns or comments you have about it. Because I know it's controversial. Look, I know that talking about psychic ability to a largely paranormal interested audience has to be done with some care, because there is a lot of beliefs going in various directions, and there's a certain validity to all of them. It's just what we're working on is a more authentic model, I guess you could say, and that can sometimes disturb people's sensibilities. So we're going to do it in a way that I think makes sense by the time we get done with tonight. Okay, when we should more than cover the subject tonight, because I don't really have too many stories for you this time. So that's going to, give us a lot of extra time. Okay, so calling in from down under, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father?
Good evening, Father.
Pretty well, thanks. A bit exhausted, but
really,
I'm doing okay. Had a big funeral yesterday.
Oh my goodness. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, a policeman's funeral. So
geez.
It was a privilege, but it takes it out of you.
Yeah, I know from experience myself.
Hopefully
I
old
feel
age.
a bit wiped out. So if I don't make any sense today, you'll know why.
Hopefully it was old age and not in the field.
Not in the field, but not old age either.
Oh,
cancer,
really?
so.
Oh, that's okay. That sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. But and a friend of mine too. So.
Oh my!
I lost my
really?
mentor a couple weeks ago, so I feel you.
Yeah.
He was my field training officer, my mentor, my my work dad.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Anyway, I mean, he died well, which is good.
Well, but you can't really complain then.
Still sad.
Sad, but you can't complain. Can't complain when you die well. And we got Brandon Milan from Tennessee. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
Doing pretty good. My work's been shut down for like 2 days now, so I've just been waiting for Vestiges.
Shut down? What's going on out there?
We're doing a complete remodel by taking
see.
everything out, putting everything in new, but we can't go back in till Thursday. So
I got you.
Yeah.
Free time.
Well, I guess relax, right? I mean, you probably don't make money though when you're not working, do you?
Nope.
Yeah, so that's not good. But anyway, at least enjoy your time while you have it. Let's get into, I guess, tonight's questions from the. Oh no, wait, what are we doing? We've got our.
Okay, the Bowmore 21 still lives. We're going to finish it tonight.
Yeah, this is the Aston Martin edition. I forgot about liturgical libations. We can't just do questions without a little bit of libation, right?
Well,
so this was a wonderful. This was a wonderful, hard to find special edition of Bowmore, and I was not anticipating ever being able to try it because I didn't think we'd find it in this country.
I know where there's one more.
Maybe it might be worth
if
grabbing
it wasn't sold.
Well, I don't
pretty
know.
much a James Bond whiskey, right? Aston Martin.
It is kind of a James
whiskey.
Bond whiskey.
I mean,
and Aston Martin's my favorite car. It really is.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah, I mean, honestly,
you
I love
too.
Aston Martins.
Now the '67 Mustang.
I don't know.
I have sat inside an Aston Martin DB5. So that's the Sean Connery James Bond car. A friend of mine's dad owned one. And
that's the old small little tiny ones. Yeah.
They had a racing handbrake, on the window side.
Not saying they're not sexy, just not my type.
I don't know. The VK, what was that? The VK Vanquish, the one that's in Bond, with
in the new Bond, yeah.
It would have been Pierce
it.
Brosnan's Bond. I think that was the one that had it.
Oh, in GoldenEye.
The Vanquish, right? That's a very nice car. Yeah.
No, I'd love one.
Have you had this?
There's also not many English cars left, and that is one of them.
That's true. Yeah. Have you had this one, Father? This Bowmore?
I've not had that one. I've had Bowmore.
I'll see what we can do next time you come Conus.
Yeah. Well, I hope it's soon.
We need to get you out here. We need to get you out now that things have quieted down a bit.
That's just one of them scotches I don't mind drinking.
Bowmore's wonderful. It's
Bowmore's
probably
very easy to drink.
Pinky's out.
Easy to drink.
Very much so. It's the one Bowmore. I always introduce people that say, "Oh, I don't like eyeless scotches." It's like, well, you need to try Bowmore before you make that determination.
I don't, and I like that one.
And the other one is Bunnahabhain. That's another one that's very approachable. Very approachable.
I finished a bottle of that 2 weeks ago.
That's hard to get around here now. It used to be very easy. Now, ever since COVID, they just haven't restocked. I don't see it anymore. But
fortunately, in Australia, they're well stocked on whiskey, but not many people drink it.
That's weird.
So, they tend to be rum drinkers here.
Rum, really?
Because we've got massive sugar fields, up in Bundaberg.
You got all that Polynesian influence, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so people tend to drink rum, so that's great. Leaves the Scotch for me.
Right.
Nothing wrong with that, right? Now, Scotch is very, very big out here. There are certain editions. Like I bought a bottle of Octomore, which is very hard to get. I got a bottle a couple months ago, and it will come in one bottle, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and if you don't get it on the day it arrives, you will not get it. And they will not hold it for you because they don't want to play favorites and they don't want people, trying to expect favors and stuff. So essentially,
here's a top tip in case you see it on the shelf. There's a very affordable blended peaty Scotch whiskey, which is called Smokehead.
Oh, I know about Smokehead. I've had Smokehead. I've had that.
Yeah,
I've had
so
it.
it's affordable. So if you want an affordable try of Octomore, then because Octomore that's not a starter for people that are not
It's not,
used to
yeah,
peaty
it's
whiskies.
not definitely not something that a newbie would want to buy because it is very expensive. But for me, it's more about being able to be there when they put it on the shelf before somebody else gets it. That's the hard part because it will go. It will go. And they've told me every time they put Octomore out, it's gone by the end of the day. And I just happened to, I didn't try for it. I just happened to be at the store the day that they put it out. And I said, it never even made it to the shelf. I said, I'll take that. And I drink it very slowly. It's like I'll have it every maybe twice a month, but
a wee bit.
It's very rich. It's one
very
that
rich.
you would drink slowly.
It is. It's one for when you're in the mood for that. You would hate it because it's the speediest Scotch
Yeah,
on
I
the
don't
planet.
care for the pee.
It's
can buy
very,
it.
very strong. It's like some people that are not used to it describe it as an ashtray.
I'll stick with the Dalmores. Thank you.
All right.
Jamie, look what's next to me on the desk.
Oh, there you
Oh
go.
yeah, that looks familiar.
Yeah. Yeah. All ready to come back out. Okay.
Got a few of those left.
Yeah.
Brandon, what do we have for questions from the ether tonight?
So this first question was actually asked on part one, but we didn't get to it. So it is, if what mediumship truly is interacting with the information and not the dead themselves, then why is mediumship spoken against in Leviticus?
Well, I think, again, it comes back to the fact that that's not how the Jews would have understood what it was any more than people today understand that's what it is. It's always been believed to be an actual thing, whether you're talking about people from ancient times or people from today. And it is only after developing a more, I guess you could say, a more enlightened approach towards it through both research, praxis, particularly as we talked about last week, and we'll probably talk a lot about again this week regarding, the use of various Buddhist techniques to sort of unravel the nature of reality and what it means to be real. So it's a very philosophical question, and these are not things that are always answered well by religion. Just because there's a relationship between philosophy and theology doesn't mean they intersect very well. And in fact, I'd say they didn't intersect at all until Thomas Aquinas really brought it home. Maybe a little bit of Augustine, but I think it was really Aquinas that sort of married theology to philosophy for the first time, and at least in a very, profound way, in a way that actually changed the model of Christianity. So prior to that, theology would have been more of a mystical, spiritual, dare I say, paranormal kind of interaction rather than it being philosophical. I've always been very philosophical about my approach to religion. In fact, I would say my religion really is philosophy through the flavor of Christianity. That's how I would look at it. Theology is just my model. I don't take things literal. I don't need to. There are things that I do think are literal contained therein, but it doesn't matter to me if we were to find out that later on those things were not literal. It doesn't change anything for me, and that's because my ultimate approach is a philosophical one. The ancient Jewish people did not have that same kind of perspective. They did have one, but it would have been one that was more in line with their cultural understanding. And so by the time you get to like Levitical law, the pervasive understanding of how you communicated with the dead back then was through necromancy. So what is being condemned here is not mediumship as much as it is necromancy. It's bringing people back from the dead that should not be brought back. It's doing ricituals, occult rituals, to conjure them is what's being condemned here.
Isn't that why it's, again, I'm not speaking authoritatively on this, but isn't it also connected to the ritual purity when it comes to animals? Because a lot of this involved using the entrails of animals. You could argue this was like a form of a more enlightened approach that the Israelites took. They're saying we're not going to slaughter animals, we're not going to shed blood for the sake of
something profane,
fortune telling.
Yes.
When in fact the shedding of blood is actually a ritual sacrifice that has its context to do with the shedding of sin in the temple.
You are right on that. It is, because blood is unclean. If it's not being used in exactly the right kind of way, in the sacrificial sense, blood is an unclean. It's why they kosher, kosher meat, right? You take the blood out of it. Why the Jewish people were extremely scandalized by Jesus saying that, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, there will be no life. I mean, that's why they would have been so scandalized by that. It wasn't so much that it seemed like a ludicrous statement to them. That's not what they were reacting to. They were reacting to the fact that he was talking about doing something that was absolutely profoundly unclean, drinking human blood. That was just not, it was an unthinkable thing to even suggest that a Jewish person should do. And here's this, this rabbi, this teacher, telling you that's exactly what you need to do. And so that was like, it just broke their paradigm. But they're not really, mediumship wasn't a thing, okay, in the way it is today. The way that it's done today, in this sense that, people are picking up on sensitivities of communicating through some kind of almost telepathic connection, is very different than performing an occult ritual with entrails and killing animals.
Well, because you could argue that kind of, what people today call mediumship was actually just normal life.
Yeah.
Because everything operated on intuition and spiritual insight, and this is a pre-rational enlightenment world, and so. It's a world actually that we really can't imagine. I mean, we try, we look at texts and we look at archaeology, but we really can't recreate that world. We have no idea. It's so beyond us. But yeah, I mean, it's to say that what people call today as mediumship was just normal life.
Yeah, and it would have been something that would have been related. So what you're talking about with Leviticus is the way that things are being translated today. And so that was basically a poor choice to translate the words that are being used here in Leviticus to mediumship and relate it to the modern understanding of it, because back then it would have been necromancy that was being condemned. So that, I think, answers the question, unless you need more.
Yes, mistranslation.
Yeah.
I say no. That's just one of those things that I was taught it's like this exactly. No reading between the lines. So that's just one thing I'd always been confused on.
I think there's a partly because you grew up in a bibliolatry environment, where because things are so confined to, and that's why things that sort of big trump cards that atheists think that they can play on people like us. They go, oh, but this translation. I'm like, who cares? Like, honestly, I mean, I'm not saying the Holy Scriptures aren't divinely inspired, very important writings. Of course they are. But when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, why would that change your faith? Like, seriously, right. And so I think there is a sort of there's almost a cross-purposes conversation going on.
Yeah.
That we're really not talking about the same subject matter.
That's what it is. Most of the time, these discrepancies that you bring up, Brandon, most of the time when you talk about what you were taught or something, the discrepancy comes down to the fact that the understandings are not the same. Right. What the original intention is not how it's being received today in the modern era. It's a lack of understanding. It's kind of how, to put it a different way and to use a different analogy, it's kind of like, it's not even an analogy, it's really kind of almost the same kind of thing. It's like how people try to condemn the Crusades or the Spanish Inquisition as this horrible evil, when you cannot, as a person of modernity, use modern morality on the people of another time. You didn't live that time. You didn't have their sensibilities. You didn't understand. Particularly when you're talking about like the Middle Ages, because you didn't live that long. All right. You didn't live to live either. People did not live to try to prolong their life for indefinitely because they knew they couldn't. So really what it was about having a short period of time to do things the best way that you thought you could for God. And if it meant that if your culture believed that what God wanted was the Christianization of the world, then you would have done everything within your power, even to the point of, putting your life out there and going to war over it. Or if people were challenging that sensibility, you would fight them for it because that's what you lived for. Today, we don't think like that because what do you live for today? You live for, having a nice job, big house, 2 cars, wife and kids. I was going
to say, the big shift was the Industrial Revolution, which basically invented leisure time.
Yeah, that's right.
Leisure time is a late 19th century invention. Right. Nobody had leisure time. In fact, many people don't have leisure time today across the world.
Right.
It's only thanks to capitalism and free markets that people in the nicest places on earth to live have leisure time, and so leisure time is and it's of course both a gift and a curse. I mean, I think going back to your Brandon, the fundamental question. I think where I would agree with the sorts of people you grew up around is the psychological impact of if people only make decisions or live their lives according to what some sage tells them or predicts about the future, that is a danger. And I think that the scriptures do point against that sort of thing, but that's not in Leviticus. Those are the things that are brought up in the prophets and in the accounts of what Christ said as well. That we're not supposed to restrict what we do in life because of the influences of other people. Right. We are ultimately supposed to, and also we're called to live sacrificial lives. So we if it's a distraction from that, when these things become a distraction from trying to serve God in our lives, second guessing that mission, then I think they are to be eschewed. But that's not because it's necromancy, because it's not.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Can't judge the past through modern eyes.
You can't. And you have to understand, I mean, and we can't even hope to understand it the way they did, even with the best scholarship. There's only so far you can go. Unless you've been those.
Well, it's why the quest for the historical Jesus, because this was a kind of in gospel kind of biblical studies terms, there was the quest for the historical Jesus. The focusing on what we can verify about the historical Jesus as opposed to the Christ figure.
Yeah.
And I ultimately I'm on the side of those who think that the quest for the historical Jesus is a folly. I think not that it doesn't yield some interesting stuff, but for me, that's not where I'd place.
I don't think it enhances one's faith any. I mean, honestly, I don't think anything about whatever the historical Jesus did outside of the theological one. I don't think it enhances one's faith or relationship to him. So
nor damages it. I think it's just chewing gum.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I do. What's our next one?
So the next one comes from Andrew. He asks, is my guardian angel one and the same as what Western ritual magic terms the holy guardian angel?
Not really, no. What the Western magical or ceremonial magical traditions term that the holy guardian angel is really more of a higher, more authentic self. And that is not the same thing as what scripture or religion or Christianity teaches as an angel. Angels are a completely different part of creation, a different species, if you will. They are not aspects of ourselves. They are independent aspects of creation. That exists to serve God and to serve creation. Okay, kind of keep creation together. But the what they're referring to is more of a higher self, or how the New Age would look at the higher self and this more authentic thing that we're trying to arrive at. So now they're different things. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't some kind of, I guess you could say, ethereal relationship between one's guardian angel and one's higher self, because in Christianity there really isn't a higher self. There's basically just your fallen self, and then Christ raises you up. There's not like something higher or better about you. There is just what you are, and what we all are broken, fallen creatures that are in need of redemption. So there's, I think the higher self component gets mixed into the New Age, because the New Age rejects largely this notion that we're sinful, we're fallen, we need redemption. It sees it more along the lines of that this is the church trying to control you. And so all you need to do is arrive at your higher nature, and then you will see things. And this somewhat comes from a bastardization of both Hinduism and Buddhism, once again, because there is something in Buddhism referred to as Buddha nature. And that's kind of like a higher self, but it's not a self at all, because there is no self in Buddhism. That's the whole doctrine of anatta, where there is no individual identity. Ultimately, these are all illusions, as we talked a lot about 2 weeks ago. And so the higher, to say that there's a higher self is sort of a misnomer. It's a contradiction in terms, but they're getting it from Buddha nature. And Buddha nature is the nature of the awakened, okay? That ultimately in our core, once we remove all of our attachments, once we stop longing for the things that cause suffering, we then arrive at what is enlightenment. And that point is we discover our Buddha nature. In other words, we're already there. It's just the only difference between those in nirvana and those in samsara are that the ones in nirvana know it, and the ones in samsara don't know it. But that's kind of how it comes from. So the higher, the holy guardian angel as a higher self kind of thing is really just a theosophical bastardization of that, just like what they did with reincarnation. Okay, reincarnation, or what people think they understand about reincarnation today in the West, is a completely different thing than how Buddhists understand it. It's not really the continuation of a self. All right. It's not the continuation of a self. It's a continuation of an experience, which is what we were trying to get at a little bit last week with, these are good questions actually for this show, because it kind of leads into the subject matter. But it's what leads us into the delusions that we're trying to avoid, and the lack of authenticity, and the fact that we live in a fabrication or a fiction that in Buddhism and Hinduism refers to the Maya, this illusory nature of existence. So now they're different things entirely. And I would go as far as to say is that what the ceremonial, tradition is actually trying to get at with this holy guardian angel is really Buddha nature. It's just they don't want to term it Buddha nature because it's too Buddhist. It would be like saying, Christ consciousness. How many times do you hear New Agers say Christ consciousness?
Oh, yeah.
What the hell is that? What is that? I mean, what you're gonna tap into the avatar of Jesus, and now he becomes you. I mean, that's kind of how they think.
St. Athanasius would have a lot of issues with that.
I know he would, wouldn't he? Yeah, and that's all theosophy that did that. So basically what you have, and the reason I'm so hard on the New Age, is because the New Age is a made-up fiction that is based on taking a bastardization of a bastardization.
They're just rebranding.
They are. So theosophy. You get Blavatsky that goes out there, okay, and studies Eastern religion, which was kind of a novelty back then, because nobody really had. You weren't taking. Back in Blavatsky's days, you weren't
just an extension of the Grand Tour.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't just like, you wouldn't just go on vacation to China, like you might today. it was a completely different type of world. People were really, unless you were very wealthy, you didn't really leave your town. So it was a real novelty for somebody that went and studied Eastern religions that nobody had ever heard of. So exotic, these philosophies. So when she came back with what she understood to be the meaning of these things, some of it she got wrong, some of it she kind of got right. A lot of it was very wrong. But that became the basis for the transition, and it got linked into the Spiritism movements and everything else when all of this became the foundation to what is now the New Age movement, where people now, everyone could be a medium, everyone's a psychic, everyone's got a higher self, and everyone's reincarnating, and you choose your parents, and you have your life lessons to learn, and so you come back and you choose the body you're going to have, and
spiritual
what I love about the New Age is how old age most of the adherents are.
I know, right? I know.
They're all boomers.
Yes. Now they are, because it fell out of favor. It didn't have the sustenance. But now it's like it's almost worse, because now we're just like this postmodern secularist, abysmal atheism that's taken over in its place.
When I was first a policeman, I was in a rural area before I went to London. And we had a few of these kind of New Age gatherings, and they were all my parents' age, these people, like almost all, mostly. It was just so funny talking to them, because they'd talk about how they grew up, whatever it was, Anglican or Catholic or Baptist, whatever, but how free they are now. And, and they describe their lives and all of these bloody rules they live by. and I thought, how free are you? You're not free at all. You're like completely bound up by all this bullshit. Because I was a relatively recent Christian when I joined the police. I think I've been a Christian for about 3 years, something like that. And I just thought, and I was going to a Baptist church then, but I thought, oh my God, if this is the alternative, I've definitely chosen the right way. Your way is far too complicated.
It really is. And it's all just a misunderstanding of old ideas and everything else. We've got a caller calling in from the 612 area code, Minneapolis. Hello, you are on the air.
Hi, my name's Bryan.
Hey, Bryan.
I just wanted to call and just say thank you for doing the show. I first saw you on Ghost Adventures on the episode in Las Vegas, and
that was a good one.
That episode really acted me and furthered my curiosity into the spiritual realm and strengthened my faith. So I wanted to call and just say thank you.
Well, thank you for calling in and actually telling this, and sharing it with our audience too, because, this is something I hear a lot, honestly, but usually privately. Usually people will just send these emails, and, I just have to mention it, that I got another email where somebody was touched by the episode. But it's really nice to hear, because, doing television and putting yourself out there in that way in the paranormal genre as already a controversial figure in religion is a real mix for a lot of controversy and a lot of headache, honestly. So it's always nice to hear that it did so much good, because it really did.
If you can bring one person back to the faith, that's the bee's knees. But we've heard this several times.
We have,
so
but never.
Appreciate your testimony, Bryan.
Yeah, but nobody's ever called in to say it.
That's true. Appreciate that.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you so much for doing that and sharing that. Because it really it means a lot to me, honestly. It sometimes when you do it, and I look back at all the episodes and everything and all the headaches we've gotten for it,
man.
I think, was
Trying
it
to
worth
defend
it?
ourselves on social media.
I'm telling you, it's like you think, was it worth it? Was it worth it? What did I do? Nobody understands, but it's like, but there's really a silent or semi-silent majority out there that was impacted by this, and it definitely did some good. And your testimony is proof positive of that. So thank you so much for calling in and sharing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, enjoy the show. Thank you again.
I think sometimes it's about quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's just one of those areas that I think has been lost lost over time.
Yes, it is.
So-
and you're right. And it's television, right? So people think everything on a reality show it's got to be fake or scripted or something like that. But
Nope, not for us.
I mean, the work we do is very real. And I think that does come through if you really pay attention, and Sin City is a good example of that. Biggs is another good one. Biggs was a really,
Yeah.
Another one where you can really see how people are affected. If you pay attention, you look in people's eyes, and you look at the people that are involved, you can tell when someone's being dishonest.
Go to the last 30 seconds of the episode to Horn Biggs after I hug Gloria.
At your stick-up
when
tab.
she looks into the camera, that's not acting. She was genuinely horrified at what she saw her husband going through. That one stuck with me for quite a while.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So again, Bryan, thank you so much for calling in and sharing that. That means the world.
And hey, Brian, you take that inspiration and that renewed faith and invest it in Minneapolis and make it the great place it once
And God
was
be
and
with
can be
you.
again.
Thanks for
Upper Midwest.
having me on.
Absolutely. Call in anytime.
Take care, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye.
Yeah, that we hear a lot. Honestly, those very words too.
That was pretty cool.
It was. I mean, it's like it's great that it has had so much impact on people. Those appearances on Ghost Adventures, and people can criticize it all they want, but it really it touched a lot of people. It touched countless people, and that made
It's
it
much
worth
easier
it.
to tear down than to create.
Oh yeah,
Always.
And but also, like, I mean, even from my own life, I mean, my my stepdaughters, I was their parish priest. They live with me, but they start asking questions about spiritual things because they watch Ghost Adventures.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there you go.
It's a good segue.
So it's like people can say, I can't believe you go on that show. You're teaching people to do evil things by ghost hunting. And it's like, you have no idea how many people came back to the church because they saw me on that show. You have no idea. They've told me.
Yeah.
They told me that I had no interest in God. I used to go to church. I stopped going years ago, and I saw your episode, and it inspired me to go back. I hear this all the time.
Wait
It's
till they
such a great
see
thing to hear.
the new one we did.
I know.
It's going to
there's-
be interesting
I'm
to
looking
see how
forward
they
to
edit that.
I've
It was
not asked you any questions about it.
no, we
kind of
well,
deliberately.
obviously we
so I want it to be a
can't talk
surprise.
about it, but I can tell you it's pretty powerful on our end. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, we can't talk about the details, but we can definitely say it's another different one. I mean, and they're all very different, but this is one
I
that's
just don't know when we'll be able to get it here in Australia because it's so ad hoc, which series
Right.
we can get.
Well, I can tell
and
you-
you can't buy them, like,
I can tell you how you get around that. You get a VPN. Use a
I
VPN.
have got a VPN.
Well, then that's all you have to
send
do.
send me an email with what I need to go to.
There you go.
There you go. That's how you get around it. But
I've got ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN, you might like to sponsor the show.
hey, tell them about it. We need sponsors here. We do. But no, it's such a what a like mind blowing, refreshing thing to hear. Somebody call in and tell us
real
that.
nice.
Yeah,
That was real nice.
And
Brilliant.
It always makes me happy. Brings a huge smile on my face every time I hear it because it's like, once again, I am reaffirmed that I did the right thing. So yeah, that's the Holy Guardian Angel. What's our next one, Brandon?
So the third one comes from Danielle, and she had posted a story after it, but her question was, is it possible that living in a building built over the site of an old, terminally ill children's hospital could be contributing to my increasing poor health?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
without question, because there's so much residual energy that a place like a hospital collects, whether it wants to or not. So the thing about hospitals is that there's a lot of trauma and death. Okay, by their very nature, by what
Grief.
by what they are, and grief as a
Yeah.
result of it. So you have fear. People going in for operations, they're terrified. People being told that they have terminal illnesses. People going in for treatments where they might not come out of them, and people going in and not coming back out. And then of course they have morgues and other things. So there's a lot of negativity surrounding the nature of death associated with a hospital. So hospitals are horrible places to be. They are
and
horrible.
no resolution. Because obviously we have dead bodies in churches a lot.
Yes.
You know, we do lots of, but it's because the funeral rites are being done.
Right.
They're being done.
And even in graveyards, you know, like, you know, people, graveyards are all haunted. Well, actually, you know, mostly not, because people have been laid to rest with rites, you know.
Most
but
of
in
the
a hospital,
graveyards, yeah, I usually
you
feel
know,
at peace when I'm in a graveyard. So
me too.
I've never
you
had
know,
a,
so, but you know,
experience.
I've had them in my back garden. A lot of places I've lived
Yeah.
because of my job.
Yeah.
But you know, but hospitals, that resolution doesn't take place there.
right.
Well, the only thing about hospitals that can sometimes bring in paranormal activity is, I think, the same reason churches do, is that their nature is that they can sometimes shine, or if they're doing the right thing, right? If the people that are involved in the church are actually sincere in their effort to be a church, it shines like a bright beacon that attracts those who are lost. They don't know what they're finding. They're more like moths looking for flames, right? So they will be drifting through the darkness of unknowing, you know, the darkness of their own ignorance that they died in, with only their trauma and their fear response to guide them, which is obviously terrible. And it brings them to find places that they can innately feel safe. And so they will be attracted to blessed objects, holy ground, churches, cemeteries, things like that. So that can sometimes create an increase in paranormal activity. But I would not say they are haunted in a traditional sense.
Well, Mystic does go on to say that it was a convent afterwards. So,
well, that doesn't necessarily mean the energy improved.
no, that's what I'm saying. It could actually make it worse.
Yeah, those nuns throwing erasers at you and stuff, that could make it a lot worse.
Don't get us going on nuns. Oh my goodness. We'll get cancelled.
I'm telling you.
Get your knuckles wrapped with a ruler.
Yeah, I would say that is energy that even when one is no longer, I mean, even when one is still in operation, there's just really bad energy. I make it a point to stay away from them. I'm very sensitive to energy, more so today than ever in any point in my life.
I am too. Thanks a lot. It's partially your fault.
You would not, and I bet you when you go
Big
to
time.
hospitals, they're worse than it used to be.
I do. So I had my spiritual experience in the hospital when I had my NDE and my accident, and I've been in that same hospital where I was in the ICU since then when one of my partners got shot, and it was very strange to go up on the same floor I was on, and I started to break out in a cold sweat and had anxiety, and it was a very strange experience for me.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So I try to avoid hospitals as much as I can now.
Yeah. So I would say the danger really is that the energy, no matter how you slice it, is it's typically very negative. And as Father Chris pointed out, it's unresolved death energy.
Right.
It's not like church death, you know, it's not like graveyard death. Even a funeral parlor, although that's pushing it, because you have embalming, which is not usually a pleasant thing. If a person's very much still attached, then they will experience it. See, that's what I try to tell people all the time. Buddhism has a rule, you know, bodies should be left alone for 3 days minimally. And there's even other circumstances where you might even prolong it longer than that. They look for signs of release and stuff like that. There's various things that happen to the body that show that there's been release of the attachment. But most people are going to die attached, not realizing that they're dead. And can you imagine being thrown into a refrigerator, being thrown, being sliced open, having all the bodily fluids removed, or being incinerated? And this is the risk. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to say is that you can get a death doula and hope that they can advocate for you and try to get some of these things resolved. But you're living in the West, you really are not able to confidently say that you're going to be able to have full control and have optimal conditions after death.
I think this really is a civil rights issue because essentially you don't. As soon as you die in almost all Western countries, basically the state owns you.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and so now, you know, to a certain extent, you know, we don't want murderers getting away with murder, you know, so these things aren't clear cut, but, you know, the idea that all of a sudden the state has to intervene and whisk you away. I mean, it's partly because people want that to happen as well.
Oh, they want
it. The state's done this because actually families don't want to have dead bodies of their relatives around. So yeah, but it is a shame, but it is, like I say, it's actually a civil liberties issue because you should be able to. I mean, fair enough, you might have to pay for it, but you should be able to in a will say.
I think the tide's slowly turning
my
on
body
that.
must be treated.
It is in my will. Whether or not anybody will be able to legally observe it is another matter.
Well,
but
right.
it is in my will. You know. And it actually states...
if you die unexpectly, then it goes out the window because the coroner says, no, we're doing a post-mortem.
You know, and I'm going to say then it's on you. And I think I actually say, I think it even says in my will, I think I even have it in there, like, woe to you who tries to violate this, because
I'm going to curse your ass.
I will do everything in my power to make sure that you pay the price. It says something to that effect.
Well, I think if they're starting to put people in plant pods, we may be turning the corner on that. We'll see how it goes the next 20, 30 years.
We'll see. But yeah, I mean, ideally speaking, you want the body left alone for 3 days, and that's just to give a chance for there to be the natural separation that starts to occur between spirit and body. That does not happen instantly. Death is a process, and most of the dying process happens after death is declared at the physical level.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Going back to hospitals, I mean, it's even more unresolved now than it was historically, because historically, many hospitals had at least one religious person on the ward, if not an actual religious sister.
Sure.
And so, you know, the office of the dead, or at least the prayers that are said immediately following death, were said. You know, that is a sufficient ritual. That's enough to resolve, you know, the immediacy of death.
Yeah.
But you know, these days, I mean, who on earth would be doing that? You know, it's you'd be especially. I can't speak for America, but in Australia, I mean, honestly, what I just said, people would say, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Right.
You know.
I mean, there's chaplains and stuff that we have that kind of help with certain, but it's always like the dying process. They don't really do anything for the death process. It's like
my experience of that is they're there for the staff.
Well, even in religion, they basically treat it as that as soon as the death is declared legally, it's over, and that's when the real work begins. That's when you really have to start paying attention and help that person. So. You know, all I can say is, since you're not typically you're not likely in the Western world to get the kind of after death support and care that you need, then you're going to have to take it into your own hands to make sure that you die well. And that means dying without attachment. And all the more reason
to invest in your religion now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you have time.
Well, you have time to do it. Prepared for death.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Because if you can do it, you know, if you can get yourself to that point where you can die without any kind of attachment, any kind of sense that you're not ready to go, then you'll be fine, even if you don't get that 3 days. You know, it's just the natural process Buddhism has observed, because they're very good at observing the dying process. They're masters of it, in fact. They even do death practice while alive. So they're very good at understanding that all of the levels and stages involved. And they're more concerned with those moments after the heart stops beating and the brain starts pumping out its, signals. They're looking at what happens after that. And that's when things get perilous. I'm sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
But I say mainly a lot of people don't feel that they need to be concerned, because as soon as they die, they're either instantly in heaven or hell. So what's the point?
Yeah, and see, that's just not the way it works.
Theology.
No, it's bad theology in every religion. You know, there's really, every religion has always understood that there's a perilous process. Even the whole mythos of, even in the ancient pagan world, of the underworld and the trials of the underworld and the triumphs of those that went there and succeeded. All of that comes back to a spiritual understanding that there's a struggle involved in that. And it's like, you know, if you're not giving that person optimal opportunity, then it's not going to bode well. And this is what I mean. I was like, everyone's always asking me, what do you mean when you say you got to die well? This is what I mean. Dying well means to die in a state where you can be completely unattached. Okay. And the best way to do that is through sincere observance of a religion. And Christianity offers a wonderful way to do that because you give yourself over to Christ. And you don't really need to worry.
These churches make a fundamental mistake, though. So they'll say things like, all of this Catholic stuff, Orthodox stuff, is just based on older pagan practices. It's just a remnant of that. You're looking at it the wrong way around.
Yeah, it's the other way around.
You're looking at it the wrong way around. Yeah. These are things that actually are eternally practiced, and these are things that the church has, in a sense, Christianized. Because they were always, the natural law way of God acting in the world and in the afterlife, and now we understand it through the lens of the Christian church.
Yeah.
But that impulse to understand that there's a process that goes beyond our earthly life, the fact that is universally believed by people, of all cultures and tribes. Up until evangelical Christians decided that, it can't possibly, they're looking at it the wrong way around.
Well, evangelical Christianity, they try to simplify everything to make it easy and comfortable. I mean, the entire formula that they use is about an easy, comfortable,
It's why it's attractive to growing very quickly, but it's the seed that fell on the path. It grows very quickly, but it has no root and it withers and dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so, like, a lot of evangelical churches are very successful with younger people, right? And they see this as their great selling point. Look at all the young people we've got, and I always say to them, where are your old people?
Right.
I've got a person
because old people are at churches that last a lifetime.
Yeah.
I've got a person in my family that is in the evangelical Christianity camp, and their social media is just like hour by hour, one evangelical meme after another. And it's almost like, are you trying to convince yourself that your bullshit is true?
I mean, they're not thinking at all. There's no thought.
None at all. It's unfathomable because it's like, if anything, that is going to kill faith. If that's what it's reduced down to, is some kind of like constant regurgitation of cliches and meaningless little things that, little games that you play with yourself psychologically and emotionally. That's not religion. That's not spirituality. That's not going to save you.
No, and that's why when the slightest hardship comes in, and by the way, there's nobody that goes through life without hardship. Don't ever fool yourself.
Got that right.
The faith just evaporates because it's based on nothing, because it's prosperity gospel, right? So all of a sudden, if or even worse, trial and difficulty and a difficult path that God's leading you down, is interpreted as God has abandoned me, which of course is heretical. God never abandons us, and so whereas. When you talked about the Crusaders before, and I'm not an apologist for that, but the only concern they had was, how can I live my life as a sacrifice acceptable to God?
Yeah, and that's
the question. And if that's your basis, even though you might do things wrong, you're at least addressing the world on the right terms.
Yes. Yeah. Well said. Very well said. Yep. So, I mean, I guess that started with the third question with Danielle on hospitals.
We've had loads coming in the thread, by the way. We're going to have a busy third hour.
Great. Well, let's make sure we get them all.
Great.
Everybody, make sure you get them all. Keep them coming. Keep your questions coming now. And even better yet, call into the show like the other individual, Bryan. His name was Bryan, right? Bryan did, I mean, we haven't put the number on the screen yet, but he found it. See, that's clever. But I think that, we're going to have a lot to talk about here, and I'm just going to give you a brief reminder as to where we left off last time, but I'm going to largely leave it to you, the audience, to kind of direct this show where you want it to go. I know I felt terrible that we ran out of time last time. So you know what? Since we're kind of at the end here, let's go ahead and take our first break. a little early, and we'll come back, and then you'll have that full time to get into it, and I can answer all your questions with Father Chris and the rest of the panel. Don't go away.
Left in the dark, contemplating about decisions. Why does no one ever see me? Did I do something wrong? Did I hurt feelings? It is hard to be found when no one's looking. I am feeling left out and I keep screaming. No one ever understands it. Feels like I became Atlantis, hidden from the world. I'm looking for a way. I'm looking for a way. Falling down deep into a lonely void and I can't get out. Hope for something magical, cause no one else seems to even bother. Looks like I'm on my own, facing this loneliness. It is hard to be found when no one's looking. I am feeling left out and I keep screaming. No one ever understands it. Feels like I became Atlantis, hidden from the world. I'm looking for a way. I'm looking for a way. Do you believe me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Take time, lost that sleep. So hard when you hit that shit, hit that split. You want that kid, you bring this back, you don't wanna hit it. Don't worry about this. Don't got the things you wish when you in that place. You want that kiss and want that kiss. Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching, always wanted more. Can you hear me? Taking a hold of me. Love wasn't meant to be. Love wasn't meant to be an enemy. Take all my energy. Take all my energy. Do you believe me that I'm a lonely soul? Would you love me? I've been searching.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We're now going to get into tonight's topic on psychic seduction, part 2, where we're just going to, like I said, kind of review what we talked about quickly, discuss maybe a debriefing from last week's show with Regan Forston, and then just jump right into what might be on your mind about the topic, and then whatever else is on your mind, too. We can just convert this into open lines, open topics if you're satisfied with everything that we shared tonight. But I didn't feel like we had enough time last time, so tonight's your chance. Don't go away. Okay, so last week what we were discussing was really related to psychic seduction in the sense of how we very easily can seduce ourselves with our own psychic impressions. Okay, so I talked about that. I talked about some stories from my life. I talked about when I was a child in the woods, when I had those that interesting little involvement with these creatures, these 3 creatures out there that told me to take a picture of my grandmother. And we, there was a picture on the screen of God is love and all of that. Okay, if you don't know the story, you got to go back and listen to part 1. Then we talked about the Ouija board, where I asked it to tell me a prediction of roulette numbers, spin the wheel and see if they could figure it out. Then we're like, well, let's just spin it and go in the next room and tell me what the number is. And it couldn't do that either. But it did have our names written in the dust on the television. Again, another television writing thing, kind of interesting. And then we talked about the 3 individuals that sort of caught me at church, at mass, and then, very strange people, the 2 women that would not look up and were praying the whole time and dropped to their knees anytime I walked by.
Yes, and Mystic had a good correlation, wondering if it was the same 3 that met you in the forest when you were a little boy.
I mean, it was kind of angelic. They were very weird, like angels are. They did touch me. Yeah. So it is very possible, but, they said I would have be leading millions of people in this ministry. So I don't know if it's this that they're talking about, but that was something that happened. And we talked about scrying. We talked about, you just basically automatic writing, and how a lot of that was not correct. And I followed everything it told me to do, and it led to nowhere. So that was kind of the basis of my personal experiences with things that did come true, things that didn't come true. And then we start talking about how do you tell the difference and why does this happen? So really it comes back to, as we discussed on the third hour of 2 weeks ago, how do we define reality? And so I'm not going to go into all that again, but suffice it to say that the definition of reality that I use in this model, and I think you'd be well to use it too, because it really does kind of sum up what religion teaches, and it doesn't matter which religion you're talking about, they all kind of get back to this point in some form or fashion, is that reality, or what is real, is not what we can observe to be true consistently, as how science or scientific method would see it or understand it, but rather what endures, what is eternal. Because only, and I said this 2 weeks ago as well, the only thing that is actually real would be something that could always be true at all points in time. And if you can say that the meal I had 2 weeks ago is real, well, then why can't I have it right now? Why aren't I tasting it and experiencing it right now? Just because something was real or felt real then doesn't mean it's real today, because it's no longer existent. And if it doesn't exist now, just because it might have felt like it existed before doesn't mean it was real then, but now it's not real, or it was real because it happened. And I think that's how we tend to see it. We tend to use linear time as an excuse by saying, well, it was real because it happened. But that's not reality. That's an experience with information. And that was the final point that we got to 2 weeks ago, was that the real enduring thing that exists definitively in this entropic universe that we in religion call the fallen world, or at least in Christian religion, the only thing that can be sure to be true, that always endures forever at all points in time, is information. Because it always exists in each time, at each point in time, whether it be past, present, or future. You might say, well, wait a second, Bishop. Things have to be discovered. But just because you haven't discovered them yet doesn't mean that the information's not there. It's just you haven't found the information. But it's there. You just have to find the information. So, yes, exactly. It's still there. So even if something hasn't yet been discovered, but it's the information, if it exists at all, is out there. And the past is the information still, because you remember it happening and you can recall that information because it's there. Okay. And the present is information. We know that's happening because you're experiencing it right now. So information, we can be reliably sure, is the only thing outside of God. And like I said last time, God is too far beyond us. So we can't really use him as an example here because we don't really know a whole lot about God. Okay, so let's just talk about what humans can reliably know to be true and reliably understand. And information is the only thing we have that touches us to eternity, definitively, outside of, again, like I said, divine spiritual encounters, like the sacraments. Of course, these are eternal realities, but
that's why. Hence why in the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word, which again, I think people think this means the Word of the Bible.
Yeah, they do.
No, in the beginning was the Logos.
The Logos.
Yeah. It's way more than words. It's the Word. It's thought. It's logic. Right, Logos.
Correct.
It's all of that rolled into this person.
And you could almost say that how is information preserved? It's through words, right? It's through word.
Word.
There's something about that, I think. The fact that there is some power, even in witchcraft or magic with a K, occult ritual, words have power. Words are things that can be used to create things, incantations, for example.
Well, it goes back to the old saying, words are very important. That's why it's called spelling.
There you go. So that's what we talked about last time. So last week, though, which was the show after part 1, we had Regan Forston on, and he talked about experiences with heaven. Okay. And I'm sure, that coming right after the part 1, I'm sure audience members who watched both shows or listened to both shows might have thought, well, maybe there's a contradiction there now. Because a lot of what Regan talks about are encounters that people have, with the afterlife. And they come back and they all kind of say the same thing. And this is being used as some kind of evidence, I guess, that this must mean that it's real because there's, again, an observation that's consistent. So you have people dying, people coming back with a near-death experience, and they're having an observation or making observations in there, and then it's consistent. They all seem to see the same things or have similar kinds of encounters. Problem is, though, there's some kind of hypnotherapy involved in some cases of these recollections. And, I do have problems with hypnosis. I do. I really, really do. Not that I have a problem with people doing it. I have a problem with people using it as a claim towards evidence, because the one thing that we can do to our brains that puts us in the most susceptible state is hypnosis. So you can very easily give suggestions to people and create memories that are not real through expectation using hypnosis. That's very easy to do. So I don't necessarily, even if a person's completely honest, and I'm not saying Regan is dishonest at all. I absolutely feel that he is one of the genuine souls we have. And that's why he's a regular on this show, because we value him and we respect him and we respect his work. But I will say that even with the best of intentions, you can still inadvertently use hypnosis to implant memories that are not real through expectation. So we kind of do this with our lives. We kind of are living in some kind of hypnotic state most of the time. We're just on autopilot going through the motions of life. And we're creating all sorts of illusions around us. And that's a lot of what we talked about. The real issue I have, though, with afterlife or near-death experience is there's two problems I have. And we're going to rectify one of them. Not this season because we've run out of shows, but maybe early next season, after Christmas when we come back, we're going to work on getting Regan on with. I feel so bad. I cannot keep his
David Gorelli.
Gorelli, thank you, right? David Gorelli. For some reason, I can't keep that name in my head. David Gorelli. He's only been on the show once, and I think it was last season. Actually, I thought it was more than that, but it was actually last season. And he has all his research is on negative near-death experiences. And Regan made it a point to say at the end of last show that he's not encountered any in thousands and thousands and thousands of cases. They've never come across a negative near-death experience, demons, hell, anything like that. Whereas David Gorelli would argue that point. So I'm going to try to bring them both on the same show, not to create a debate, not to have a fight amongst them. I'm not interested in that. I am interested in sort of a roundtable discussion where everyone can bring to the table what they've encountered to have an open discussion about it and see what both of these researchers can say about each other's work. Because I know that David Gorelli approaches this less so from a mediumistic vantage point or metaphysical vantage point. Regan is more metaphysical or oriented, more open, I think, to spiritual observations, whereas I think David Gorelli was more looking at it from just the hard evidence, if I recall correctly. I'd have to watch the show again, but that's how I remember him. So it would be interesting to kind of see. And then we have Jamie Wolf right here with us, who had her own negative near-death experience.
Oh, yeah.
So, to say that that there's nothing negative out there, what is it then? So I'm sure some of you were probably listening to Regan and saying, after listening to part one, thinking, how does this make sense? Because here's the bishop saying that death is perilous, that there's this process and we have to die well. And if we don't, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Okay. Attachment is toxic. And then you have all this research from someone like Regan Forston that comes forward and kind of makes it seem like it's almost like what Brandon grew up learning. You just die and you go to heaven. There's all these aides and they're there to help you. And do you want to go back and live again? Or you can just take time out for a while and rest. It sounds wonderful, but it also sounds really fabricated to me. And I'm not, again, easy. I'm not discrediting Regan at all. I do think the research and what people are experiencing is absolutely genuine experiences. I do agree. However, just because someone has an experience doesn't make it authentic. You're having an experience right now. I guarantee you it's still being filtered through all your biases, illusions.
Well, and moreover, just because he hasn't experienced people having negative ones doesn't mean they're not there.
Doesn't mean it's not
he's
there.
Not experienced them.
That's why I want to bring them on together to kind of like see if there can be some common ground that's found, and we'll do that probably in season 9.
It might support the idea of being anathematized as well.
Oh, it's possible. Yeah. So anyway, my point is, what's going on with all these people's experiences? Like when Regan's saying they're going to these different levels and they're seeing different things, and there's like this council. I know Brandon was all caught up with the council last week.
Council of 6.
The council. Yeah. He's heard this before. I have too. There's all these things that people are reporting here. I'm going to shatter some illusions right now. Okay. Buddhism already knows what this is. All right. If you talk to a Tibetan Rinpoche, they're going to probably smile. They won't shatter your illusions like I will. They'll be more delicate, but
no, they're nice.
They're nice. I'm not as nice. But it goes back to something I said very briefly in part 1, and it's worth reaffirming here right now. And that is that just because you die doesn't mean the illusion stops. All right. Your preconceptions, your biases, your fears, your traumas, they continue on instinctually. And so if you are dying in a state of delusion, then your first experiences upon being dead are going to be the continuation of that delusion through the expectation of whatever it is you've been taught to believe is true. So yeah, you're going to see Jesus and he's going to be like, hey, come on in, and it's going to feel like love and you're not going to want to leave. It's going to be wonderful, but it's all going to be an illusion. So Buddhism has a very interesting process, in particular the Bardo Thodol of the Vajrayana school, which is the one that does the most research, I think, into after-death phenomenon or phenomena. Because there's a lot of different appearances. It's plural, and what it really amounts to is that you are being prepared. When you die, and if you have the proper preparations being made, you have somebody that's guiding you, the dead, through the delusions of the Bardo, which is the in-between state, the state between. I guess you could say samsara in nirvana, but it's kind of like it's between. You're not quite dead. You're not quite alive. You still exist, but not really. Okay, and so it's very halfway, and the Bardo is the perfect space between. Okay, and there's multiple Bardos right between seconds. Every time you hear silence between my snapping my fingers, that's a Bardo. The silence between them, not the snapping. The silence between them is the Bardo. The emptiness between them is the Bardo. And the most profound Bardo is the Bardo of death. Okay. So in that moment, you're going to be hit with all sorts of delusions of your attachments. Whatever you're dying with, whatever your attachments are. And let me tell you, most people are even attached, even if they've done great strides in not attaching to their family members or their jobs or their money or their homes or their security. I guarantee you that a lot of people are still going to die attached to their idols about Jesus, about the Bible. They're not ready for the actual Jesus. That's too scary. You know, the one that has both the eye of compassion and the eye of judgment looking at you, that's a way too scary of a Christ. So they have to make the buddy Jesus or the little Jesus with the child on his knee smiling. You know, that's the kind of idol they need. And that's what they will see. But Buddhism, you know, of course, they're not looking for Jesus. They'll be looking for other types of things. And one of the things that they are absolutely taught to prepare themselves for is that they will be countless luminosities. You know how remember Poltergeist? Don't go into the light, Carol Ann. Turns out that advice is actually quite true, not for the reasons that they cite it in the movie, but the advice is actually true. The light that we go into, and apparently people in near-death experiences, positive ones, report when they go into, is like this perfect. They go into happiness and they feel nothing but love and peace. Is all delusion. You actually want to avoid the lights. You want to go to the darkest corner that scares you. That's where you go, because it's there that you will find the truth of existence. And if you can conquer that, then you're ready to actually leave the wheel of samsara in the Buddhist worldview.
That's very Jungian as well.
It is very, very much so. Yeah, it's the underworld journey of the hero. It's basically that kind of archetype, right? Jung
developed it. He said you go into that darkness in the darkest pit and in the darkest point and the darkest thing. That's where you then see the light of the cross.
Yes,
what happened to me,
it's true.
Yeah.
And what does Jesus do?
Right.
Does he take the easy way out? Did he do the Gnostic thing and be like, you remember the laughing Jesus in the Gospel of Peter or Judas? I think it's Peter, where they're watching the apostles are watching Jesus die on the cross. And they're horrified. And they're like, I can't believe that we've truly lost him. I can't believe this has happened. This doesn't feel real. And then they all of a sudden hear this guy laughing behind them. And so they turn around and it's Jesus. And he's like, look at he doesn't say this, but this is the implication. Look at these idiots. They think that they could hang me on the tree. They think they could kill me, and so everyone's overjoyed that it was all an illusion. That's not the Jesus that's not the Jesus we have in authenticity. The Jesus that we have faces death. He doesn't shy away from it, and he teaches you how to do the same. So that's the model Christianity uses, which is, I think, more direct and to the point, which is the danger of what Brandon talks about with this instantly going to heaven bullshit, because that completely negates the cross. It negates everything about the cross, because they want Jesus. Oh, you go do it. You go do it, Jesus. You go die. You go die for me, but I don't want to have to deal with that pain and suffering. I don't want to do it.
Well, it's also bypassing the great act of love of God purifying you too.
Yeah.
God correcting, enabling you to conquer your sins.
Yes.
That's the profound act of love that makes sense of the cross.
Yes.
And so if it's just when you die, you just you're on a fluffy cloud talking with all your favorite family pets. What the bloody hell was the point of the cross then?
It's something Jesus had to contend with.
It's naive, dumb, stupid, anti-gospel.
It is just
rubbish.
Well, that's the whole problem with the whole thing, that Jesus will take care of it. He'll do it all. You don't have to do anything. Are you saved? Do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior? Then you're all set. You're done. You say yes.
I would say to them, when they say, "Are you saved?" I say, "How many times have you been saved?"
But that gets us back to
the next altar call. They'll be saved again.
They'll be saved again.
It's like,
so that gets us back to what we're dealing. So look at how Christianity has the people under their delusions. Even Buddhism has to have a method, because they know people are going to die with delusion. And what's to say that the more theosophical, new agey, metaphysical types that are the kind of people that are going to be interested in what Regan Forston does in his institute, why wouldn't they have delusions too? Of course they will. So all of this is being flavored by it. Now, I didn't want to come out and challenge him on the show, but I did ask him a little bit about where he thought this fit into what he's experienced. I'm not sure I really got the answer that I was looking for, because I think I gave him maybe too much of a wordy question. But we can have him back on to kind of break this down more, because I do value his research. I do think there's value there. Every time you're learning about a person's experience, there's value there. Okay, so the experiences are important, but what I'm talking about is not an experience. I'm talking about what is genuinely true, what's authentic, because that's what we really should be looking at. If we want to live a spiritual life, that's what we need to be focused on, and not the delusions and not the illusions. Okay, how do we know? How do we know that Sheol is described as this sort of semi-conscious, or not even, it's like a subconscious drifting into nothingness sort of darkness, where it's described as like a great sleep. So how do we know there's not dreaming? And how do we know that these near-death experiences are not the dreams of those in Sheol? I would say that's exactly what they are. And until Jesus literally awakens you to reality through eternal life, through the granting of eternal life, through salvation, okay, then that is your lot, is to drift into the delusion. So like I said, there's no conflict between what Buddhism teaches and Christianity. They're just at different points in the process, and they only focus on their particular domain, which is rightfully so. They shouldn't be stepping on each other's toes. There's no reason to do that. But when you put them together, like someone like me, kind of a syncretist kind of thinker, then you are going to see the bigger picture, and it makes perfect sense. The puzzle pieces fit perfectly together, and I think that's what's going on. So, look, I took a whole half hour, and I promised you that it's your show now. Okay, so the next hour and a half is all up for you guys. So if you've got questions about what we're talking about, those are the ones I'd like to deal with first, so that we can make sure that everyone's question about this topic is answered before we move on to other topics. So if you have a question, the best way to make sure that your question is answered, so that there's always a chance it could get lost in the chat room, is to call. So that's 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. And enter PIN number 855-4111. Very important. That gets you into the queue. 855-4111. And then we'll make sure that we take you on the air to get your question and properly answer it. But if you want to ask your questions in the chat, that's fine. Just be aware.
We'd also rather hear your voices.
Yeah, well, it makes it more interactive, and we do like to hear voices. It's always fun to hear. So, but let's start looking at the chat, because I know that you guys said there's a lot coming in. So let's start with you, Jamie. What have you seen any questions about this topic first?
Not yet. I've got 2 prior ones,
but not about the topic.
Not what we just spoke about.
Okay, Brandon or Father Chris, have you seen anything about the topic specifically?
I haven't seen anything about the topic, but I do have a question.
Let's go for it. And so hang on, everybody in the chat, if you have a question about this topic, about psychic seduction, or what we've been talking about, the debriefing from Regan Forston, and also, just the continuation of part 1, ask your questions now in the chat, or call into the show while Brandon is asking his questions, and we'll check it one more time. But if we don't get your question during this time, we're going to move on to open lines. Okay. So, Brandon, go ahead.
So it's more of like a question kind of comment, but kind of what we got back to a little bit on the illusion of after death. Could a person's religion be a factor? Like, let's say if a person that practices Islam dies, their illusion would be they see Allah or Muhammad, versus a person worshiping Christianity would see Jesus during this illusion. Is that what's going on?
Yeah. That's exactly what's going on, because the paradigm is the idol. Okay, so most people are not dying with a relationship to God. They're dying with an idol of who they want God to be for them, for their benefit, for their comfort. And that's not going to lead to salvation. It's not going to lead to any kind of authenticity or awakening into authenticity. It's just going to lead further into delusion. And that's the danger. That's the risk. And when that happens, see, you'll live that delusion, but you're going to do so as a lost soul, a lost spirit, really, not really a soul, a lost spirit, which is kind of what ghosts are experiencing. Okay, so when people are like seeing ghosts, all right, what I think everyone wants to know what's on there. Do they think like we do? Do they see us and interact with us like we do? No, they don't. There's no cognitive processes in a ghost. It's all just instinctive delusion. So there is obviously sensory interaction. They will respond to you, but they'll always respond through the delusion. Okay, which is why a lot of times when you do collect voices in EVP, assuming they're not just ethereal ejections from your own consciousness, which I think in most cases they are, you're going to get just data that is sort of a replay. And this gets us into the whole residual haunting theory. What is a residual haunting? You know, it's like like the energy gets trapped and it just replays over and over and over again.
Stone tape.
But what that really is them living this delusion that they're attached to. And you're experiencing it. The best way to put it is kind of like, I think the best movie that's ever approached this in any kind of realistic way is The Others.
Ooh, yeah.
That's the best one I can think of. And if you haven't seen that movie, you need to see it. I won't give away the ending. It's an old movie, so you should know it. But I'm not going to give away the ending because it's one of those shocker surprise endings.
Was that Nicole Kidman?
Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and some brilliant child actors too. They were very good in it. Yeah, that's go watch that movie. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It's perhaps it deals with this the best. If we're talking about delusion, this is what it's all about. Okay.
Well, again, I mean, not that I want to reduce everything to psychoanalysis. I'm not a psychoanalyst, but it also because that is another way of describing the ego, right? Yes. That in fact, and the reason that you experience those things through the paradigm of things that you know is because it's basically entirely ego that you're experiencing.
It is. And that's the furthest thing from God.
That's all what you can bring to it.
Ego is the fallen nature. It is Yetzirah in the body. It's an embodiment. It's a personification of Yetzirah, and that's ego. And that's why ego is what is responsible for sin. You know, we are always sinning through self-interest. You know, nobody sins just for the hell of it. You sin because it's gratifying. Okay, it does something for you. Even the most atrocious things that you can commit, it's about gratification in some form. It's filling some kind of selfish need at the expense of everyone else. You know, that's ultimately and that's just ego. That's the fallen nature. Okay, so I know it gets esoteric, but this is why I'm an esoteric Christian and not just a conventional one, because you can yes, look, you don't need to be an esoteric Christian to be saved. You don't need to be an esoteric Christian to successfully get through the trials of life and succeed in attaining to eternal life. Not at all. But that being said, you'll never truly understand what it is you're doing without all the extra information. You're going to have to really make sure you're a person of faith. Now, for a person like me who I'm not a person that struggles with faith, but I also haven't had the disadvantage of having to depend upon it. You know, my relationship to God has always been a very tangible one. So there's never been for me a question of whether or not maybe he doesn't really exist. I've never had to deal with that. I don't know what that's like because I've had so many direct experiences with God that for me, faith is kind of like, I don't need it anymore, you know, because it's like I've already experienced it. I don't need to worry about whether or not it's true or trust that it's true. I already know it's true. So, you know, for me, I'm not as dependent upon belief as others might be. So that means that I do also have to be a person that sort of looks at the tangible and tries to get to the heart of understanding why things are. Now, a Christian doesn't need to know the whys. They just need to know what to do. okay, in the Bible. And
well, I was going to say the thing that the church, I mean, the true church, the way that the means by which God has provided to lift us out of our egos are the sacraments. Mm-hmm. And so, because otherwise you are relying on your own kind of ability or knowledge. It is kind of a bit Gnostic otherwise.
It is.
What Christians have available to them are the sacraments of the church, which actually remove it from opinion anymore. So somebody comes to the sacrament of reconciliation, confesses their sins to you. When you say, you have the discussion, but ultimately you say, in the name of God, I absolve you of all your sins. It's no longer a matter of opinion. This is now signed, sealed, delivered, done by God.
Yes.
And neither you nor I can deny it anymore.
Right.
And it's why it's different from therapy, right? Because in therapy, you talk about the same thing. The sacraments draw an absolute, and the only reason it's absolute is because it's eternal, an eternal line under the conversation.
Yes.
And well, that's why God has provided a church for us to be engaged in. So for people who want to have a confidence that they don't have to go through the turmoil of having to escape your own ego at the point of death, well, the easiest way for that is to be a baptized faithful Christian who makes his confession, receives viaticum, and dies.
Well, humble yourself.
It just takes it away. Well, which involves humility,
right?
You have to give your time to it, and your mental energy while you can. Yeah.
When I had my near-death experience, where Bishop and I were talking about this after the show when Regan was here, I was a Christian, but I wasn't a practicing Christian. I'd kind of ran away from the church for like the second or third time, and I was actually practicing more of a shamanism. And when the accident happened, I knew I was in trouble. I didn't think I was going to make it. And when they were putting me on the skids to that chopper, the life flight, the last thing I said, and I remember this, was, God, I'm in your hands. Now, I wasn't taking part in sacraments. I wasn't studying. I wasn't going to church. But I think that meant something. And I was tested. And so when I was being ripped apart by these piranha demon-looking things in my subconscious when I came back from the darkness, and I cried out to St. Michael and to Jesus, and I felt this hand grab me and pull me up, I think I passed the test.
And I do think that
so
was...
humble yourself.
Well, that's true. That's true contrition, though.
Yeah.
That was absolutely. You have to let go. I just let go and said,
in the
"Look,
absence of a priest, true contrition is the absolution is.
Yeah,
received.
I don't think if I hadn't have said anything
true.
in my mind's eye, if I hadn't have just let go, I don't think I'd be here. So just humble yourself, let it go.
And see, that is authentic to distinguish the difference between some of these after-death experiences that are really just like loosey-goosey. Everything's like through rose-colored glasses kind of thing.
Definitely not rose-colored glasses.
What you experienced there
authentic.
is very authentic because that makes sense. I think it's very interesting that when you look at, again, me being a very good fusion of Vajrayana Buddhism and esoteric Christianity, esoteric Catholic Christianity on top of it, is that in the Vajrayana, the bardo is described as almost like a dreamlike kind of experience where phantoms of nightmares can be seen, and also just like things that are just like almost too good to be true. You are given all sorts of different appearances, and you have to navigate this. And if you don't know how, then you fall into one of them, and then that leads to, as they would say, rebirth. Of course, we know it's not the self that is reborn. It's all that energy that gets lost, okay, and it just gets recycled in. So that's truly hell. If you look at hell as an annihilation kind of process, kind of how Jesus describes it as Gehenna, that makes sense to me. But I also find it really interesting that Sheol is always described as a eternal sleep. This is where we even get the whole rest in peace, R.I.P. thing with gravestones at Halloween and all that stuff. And also the idea of may his soul rest in peace. Does that sound, would a person that's going into salvation to live eternal life with God, would that be the way that you would describe it? I wouldn't. I mean, that's not eternal peace. No. It sounds more like let that soul rest. Let them rest, because of that connection to Sheol, which is a very sleep-like analogy, where they're just sort of drifting in this unconscious state. But what is that to us? But the conditions upon which we dream. So I think that the bardo is the dream of those in Sheol. And I think that's the connection of the two. Of course, that's my own contention as a syncretist.
We say rest in peace as a translation of Latin, right? Mm-hmm. Requiescat in pace. And so I'm not sure requiescat is best translated as rest. I mean, we talk about requiem masses. You know, requiem masses are not where you go and rest.
Right. You know,
like, they're far, well, you shouldn't. They're far more active than that. You know, it's
well, that's why they used to have the Dies Irae, but they got rid of that too because it was just too much for people.
Not all of us did.
We'll see.
I'll have that at my funeral.
Well,
I'll
it should be there.
Dies Irae. Thank you very much.
It should be there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in fact, you know, I used to. The funerals I did when I was in England, we always sang the Days of Wrath.
Really?
Yeah, and the
you didn't do that Mass of the Resurrection nonsense?
Oh, good God, no! and the In Paradisum as well. In fact, I'm on BBC Radio 4 chanting the In Paradisum. They had a whole radio show on songs people have at funerals, and they wanted to record something in my church, and the producer got chatting to me, and like you, decided that it might be a good idea if I came on the air. And so I did this whole conversation about, you know, the trite and awful songs that people choose at funerals, and you know, and I said I was being very grumpy in high church and said, oh, people should just have the In Paradisum. And then at the end of it, it went to air. This was quite, every now and then they obviously replay it because friends of mine messaged me to say, oh, I just heard you on Radio 4. I'm like, okay. But and at the end of it, he said, would you sing the In Paradisum for us so we can record it? And to my horror, the show ends with me singing it. So.
That's wonderful. That's great. But I do think that's the correlation there. I again, it's speculative. I'm not saying that this is some kind of esoteric knowledge that has been passed down for generations. I have just always seen these perfect correlations between the mystical aspects of Tibetan Buddhism with the mystical aspects of Christianity and how much they correlate, but they're sort of like kind of shed light on the parts where the other does not. So they kind of like each one enlightens the other person's or the other one's darkness. And I think that's what it is. I think the bardo is the dreaming of the Sheol. And if you get lost in those delusions, then you get lost forever, you know, because there is no recovery from Sheol. You know, remember, Sheol translates as hell. That's the real hell. You know, it's the same thing as the pagan Hades, and it was seen very much the same way. Okay. We did not get the Dante's Inferno until the Middle Ages. They would not have equated this place of eternal punishment and torture and all this stuff at the time that in the early church. It was just not a concept then. That came much, much later. It developed later, and I think it was really, honestly, to be fair, I think it was developed as a way of scaring people into submission. It was to scare them into salvation. If they made death seem really terrible, then maybe people will believe quicker. I really think that's where it came from. Because Sheol wasn't intimidating enough. It's like, okay, well, the worst that's going to happen to me is I just drift into nothingness. Well, that's not so bad. But if you're going to be tortured for all eternity, that could suck. You know, so I think that's where it comes from. So anyway, I don't want to talk too much. Do we have any questions on the topic that came in?
I'm looking through. I haven't seen any.
Okay. So are you all satisfied with? I mean, I guess everybody is.
I think everybody's mind is blown.
Well, we didn't get.
I think that's more accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's fine.
I do have something that is
it.
Related that I think would be interesting to talk about.
Okay.
But I'm also wary that I don't want to, you know, if there's other questions people want to move on to. But I'll say what it is, and then we can take it or leave it.
Sure.
Okay. So my sister encouraged me to. She lives in a Spanish-speaking country and she speaks fluent Spanish. So she watches a lot of the Spanish things that are on Netflix, which I, you know, generally don't.
Okay.
And so not because I'm against it. I just,
right. No,
That's the best way to learn Spanish, though, is watch their soap operas.
I know, and I really do need to learn. But anyway, that aside, my failings aside, she recommended this show that was, I think it's called Deliver Me from Evil, but it's a Mexican show. I'll confirm that. I've got it here. So sorry, it's My Encounter with Evil. My Encounter with Evil. It's on Netflix at the moment, and it basically they're all. I think they're three people who've experienced demonic possession or possession of some sort, and I just want to talk about two of them in particular, very briefly. So one of them is the classic story of she reached out to the church, and this was before the church had destroyed itself at the Second Vatican Council, so she actually got some help. And it's more... Sorry, I let that loose, didn't I?
Ouch.
So it's more a classic description of an exorcism, right? And was very successful. And the although very traumatic, and the outcome of that exorcism was, she became a lifelong catechist for the church. Great fruits.
Yeah.
But
sure.
there was another. So that's one side, okay. And I obviously I'm skipping right over it. People should watch it. I'm not spoiling the show by telling you this stuff. And on the other side, there was a young woman who was, and they've got real footage of her, by the way. So they intersperse the retelling with actual footage.
Oh, really? That's
brilliant.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah, it's a really good show, and she is clearly possessed, and I would say likely by a fallen angel. I think.
Oh, wow.
So like genuine, most genuine form.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't there. I'm not there. I can't do the things that we would do to confirm that, but I think it's very likely. And the course of action was initially by her mother to surround her with, images of the saints and Mary and altars and all the rest of it. In the end, because they watch too many shows and they think these things are instant and you click your fingers and it's all done. In the end, the deal they made was that they basically did a deal with the demon and said, you can stay here. And this girl, she's a young woman now, is on the show talking about it.
Oh, I've seen this, Father. You're right. I was like horrified.
Now, I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yes.
And now, don't get me wrong, I'm kind of glad it was on telly because it was a good juxtaposition between these two different approaches. One where you combat the demon and it leads to these great fruits and an ultimate healing. And this other one, this young woman, she's not right. I mean, it's. I thought, well, that is one way. And basically,
it is a Jewish way. It's a very Jewish way. When they deal with evil spirits,
I can sleep at night. I can have peace because it leaves me alone.
Yeah,
it's like. Okay,
it's one of the ways in which Jewish exorcism works. Honestly, they negotiate with it.
Well, but the end of this negotiation was saying you can stay and have me and use me. Well, then of course the mother goes from being a Catholic to being involved in the occult, and I just thought, wow.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah.
It's worth watching.
Worth watching.
Yeah, My Encounter with Evil.
Good show. It's a good show. Yeah.
Well, I would not advocate that method any more than I would the one in the movie The Exorcist where the guy says, "Take me, damn it."
Oh no. Yeah.
I know I'm not jumping out any windows.
It's not what happened in the real case that film was based upon either.
Right. Mm-mm. No, that's not what happened. That's true. No. I want to say he was successfully liberated without any of the.
He was.
Yeah. And the priest didn't even have to jump out the window.
I think the truth of the almost the whole truth of what happened subsequent is now I think you can find it online.
Yeah.
And actually is a really good testimony. It's like a brilliant thing to read.
Yeah.
Because that guy's still alive.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because it was a boy, not a girl.
A boy. Yeah, it was a boy. Yeah. And what had no Ouija board involved either.
No.
Those were all embellishments.
Because it wasn't the movie based on the book, which was roughly based on the case itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. But the book, I think the book was, it had already made changes, and then the movie made even more.
Yeah. But the real case is actually even more
disturbing.
And also impressive. in its own way. Like, I mean, impressive is the wrong word. Us English people, we're not very good with vocabulary, so I can't think of the right word. But
you only gave it to us. Well, no, that's interesting. I mean, I guess I'll have to watch
I just
this.
thought, what an extraordinary approach. It just seems, if you're watching this show, don't do that way. Don't do that way.
That's not negotiation, not with that kind of thing and not for that kind of result. That's definitely not an option.
There was another case, by the way, that was a more recent possession and did involve the use of an exorcist, a bishop exorcist. But guess which movement that bishop exorcist was from?
I'm not
the
sure.
Independent Catholic movement.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah. Because it's so difficult to get an exorcism through mainstream Roman Catholic.
Well, they don't want to deal with it.
They're terrified of doing it.
Yeah.
Well, they're not terrified of the devil. Let me clarify. They're terrified of being sued.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it is a concern.
It is a problem.
Let's not help people.
I know. Well, I mean, that's why you have to do the whole harmless agreements, and
that's why for every 100 cases you might do 2.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and if at any point I feel there is any potential risk of harm to anyone, I stop it.
Yeah,
I stop it right then and there. I don't take unnecessary risks with it.
In a funny sort of a way, the safest exorcisms you've been involved in are the ones that are being broadcast on television, because. Yeah. There's no question as to what's happened, is there?
Yeah, it's true. No,
no one can make things up or say things. Yeah.
I mean, that's why we film everything. That way there can never be any question that there was negligence. We can always show the process from beginning. And I will not do it. I mean, honestly, I will not do it without there being a recorder on. I have in the past, much to
it's
my...
It's also why you filmed me
from
the second I crossed the
we've
threshold.
Had it
you put me on camera to make sure.
Yeah, I had to make sure.
We've had it to where we had to just jump in and go. Nobody was there to film. I mean,
there's been a few of those.
Some of the exorcism we ended up doing after Mass one night.
Well, we didn't always have a crew that was fast enough, but at this point we have a better process, and we don't do on the fly shit anymore because it gets messy and it is risky, and the church has too much to lose. So yeah, we can't risk the church getting sued over a negligent action any more than the Roman Catholic Church can. In fact, the Roman Catholic Church is more prepared, more capable of handling it.
They can afford it. Actually,
they can. Yeah, I mean, it could destroy this church if something like that were to happen. So I guess we got a few minutes before the next break. Let's just take a question, and if we don't finish it, we'll come back from the break with more to it.
I'll get Not Sure's question. I think it was pretty much answered, but he says, and I can't read my own handwriting.
Uh-oh.
Can you dedicate yourself in prayer in praying or helping the dead as part of a daily worship and meditation, like saying, light a candle to Mother Mary?
Yeah, I mean, that's good, solid Catholic practice.
Office of the Dead, too.
Yep, that's good, solid Catholic practice. We are encouraged, the faithful are always encouraged to always offer prayers for the dead, which is why every Mass includes this, why the Divine Office includes this. It's usually the last of the intercessions in the intercessory prayers. When we have intercessory prayers, it's usually the last one that always mentions the faithful departed, and why...
Church, world, sick, dead.
Yep, it's true. So that's good, solid Christian practice, and it's such a shame that really it's come down to Catholics and Orthodox are really the only ones that do it anymore. Mm-hmm. Do you know of any other denominations, Father, that pray for the dead?
Look, many Anglicans do, but really,
the more Catholic kind, the more
they're the ones that see themselves as an offshoot of the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
and obviously the Independent Catholic movement.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I kind of consider them Catholic mostly. Yeah,
the Lutherans might. I'm not sure. I think some Lutherans probably
do. They?
I think so. Because there's Lutherans and Lutherans, right? I'm talking about the Episcopal Lutherans.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, maybe then, but that's about it, really. Mind you, Catholics and Orthodox is almost all the Christians in the world, so that's good news.
Well, that is good news, and so fortunately, but I mean, it's just
Protestants are a very small denomination. They're just disproportionately large in the United States of America.
And it does become a bit overwhelming living here and having to remind oneself that this is actually the minority, because it doesn't feel like it. It's so domineering here. It's like what Brandon talks about all the time.
The biggest faith in Australia is Catholicism, and after that it's Orthodoxy, and after that it's Anglicanism, and then after that it's probably Methodists. So it's you do have a lens which is not common to the rest of the world,
and it's rough. It's difficult. Yeah. Because there's no common ground.
I know, I've been there.
Yeah, I know.
Catholic churches.
You know what it's like. Yeah, it's rough.
I had a good walk around too, and I couldn't find any Catholic churches. So,
no, and if you did come across any of them, I guarantee you would not have want to go there. The ones around the ones in,
they wouldn't have wanted me to go there.
No, it's unpleasant. I mean, there's a few good ones, but I would have suggested that you go to one of the Eastern Catholic churches instead. You'd have a more genuine experience, even though they have their problems
anyway.
Too. Yeah, but here in the South, it's really the only way to go. The Roman Catholic Church is very, very, very bad off here. It really is. Okay, so I guess we'll just break again here since we're at a good stopping point. Okay. And we will come back for the third hour, and it's all your questions for the entire time. Don't go away.
Wakes you up. The overplaying pattern of memory hides your true face. Take your own method, looking for the one who's trying to be perfect. Yeah, you will try to match it. Don't be sad if you don't make it. You hope for wonders. Living life means making blunders. It can make you shatter. You will try to fight the thunder. Trust me, no matter what happens, because I will stay by your side in your heart. Whatever happens, remember that you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want. Follow the light if you're not sure. Listen to your gut. The right path will come when the time is right. Take your own method, looking for the one who's trying to be perfect. Yeah, you will try to match it. Don't be sad if you don't make it. You hope for wonders. Living life means making blunders. It can make you shatter. You will try to fight the thunder. Trust me, no matter what happens, because I will stay by your side in your heart. Whatever happens, remember that you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final part of Vestiges After Dark. We have had an interesting discussion so far, and I think we are ready to close the topic of psychic seduction, and we can now move on to any question that's on your mind. Make sure you start asking your questions now. Put them into the chat room so everyone here can write them down and get them presented. You can also call into the show, which is our personal preference, 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 to get placed into the queue, 855-4111. If you're international, you can call free on Skype by dialing up Eye of the Seer, EYEOFTHESEER. We hope to hear from you. Don't go away. Okay, Brandon, did you see any questions from the last 2 hours that we should get to?
So, yes, I did see one question. It was very early on in the show when we were discussing Danielle's question. But this one's from Cheryl. On this question, why are nuns so dang hostile?
I wrote that down, too. Stereotype.
Not all of them are. Not all of them are.
I was going to say, we have to say that. We have
Right.
to say not
Stereotyping.
I
need some good ones.
Some of my favorite people I've ever met have been Catholic nuns.
Well, Teresa Avila was a
Orthodox
favorite.
nuns.
I mean, she was a nun, so, she wasn't so bad.
Also drank out of a skull.
Yeah.
I actually had a Benedictine Catholic nun as my spiritual director for years, and so I won't say her. She's no longer with us, but I'll not name her. She actually became fairly famous in the internet world. She had one of the top Catholic blogs in the world.
Oh, really?
She was really clever. She'd been a bank manager before she was. Before she went into the ministry. So I will start by saying one of my absolute heroes was, although I will also clarify by saying she was a habited, enclosed Catholic nun.
Which is a very different kind. I mean, honestly, what people tend to associate with the archetype of the mean, nasty nun is the sort of the school teacher nun from the 1950s. And my dad certainly had stories. I know a lot of people that went to Catholic schools back then had stories about how, mean and nasty they could be. I think, look, this is something that's not just a nun problem. It's also a monk problem as well. There are people that are completely dysfunctional people who try to hide away from the world. And some have successfully managed to pull this off by becoming clergy in the church. And if they can go and hide themselves away and do something in that capacity, that becomes attractive to them. So we definitely would see it a lot. People going to the monastery to run away because they couldn't deal with life. People running to the priesthood because they were gay and they didn't have any way to deal with this. So they thought like becoming a priest would magically give them some kind of asexual biological response, which is like the furthest thing from the truth. And so this is a problem with humanity. I mean, and so I think sometimes, there was probably a period of time where maybe around the 40s and 50s and 60s where, there were a lot of people going into the clergy that really had no business being in the clergy. They were going into it for the wrong reasons. And then that's going to make you hostile. Look, when you do something day in and day out that you hate and there's no way to get out of it because it's too late, you've dedicated your life to it, it's too hard, or maybe you're too lazy to figure out a new way out and you're just stuck there, that will make you a pretty nasty son of a bitch after a while. And I think that happened to a lot of them. I really do. And I think, look, as a person who I don't talk about very often, but I actually completed all of the credit hours necessary to receive a master's degree in elementary school education. I didn't complete the degree. I wasn't awarded the degree, I should say, because I didn't complete the student teaching that was necessary to complete it. You had to do one semester, so it was like 2 semesters of academic study. And I completed all of that successfully. And then you had to do 1 more semester of actual hands-on student teaching. Problem was, in the last semester, or the last semester of the second year, you already started doing some of that, and it was miserable as hell. I was a hired babysitter. It had nothing to do with educating children. It had everything to do with constantly disciplining them. And I can tell you from experience, it's a common thing, or it was, maybe not so much today, but it was a common thing back in the day that if you had a problem child, you would send them to Catholic schools hoping that it would kind of straighten them out. So Catholic schools had a disproportionate number of problem students.
I've heard that too.
And I think, you become a nun, you think you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to pray to God. It's going to be great. It's going to be peaceful. And then you're being inundated with these nasty sons of bitches day in and day out, and you've got no way out. I'm just coming up with a practical answer to the question because, I'm speculating here, but I'm speculating from a place of experience. I've been there. I've done that, and it wasn't pleasant. And that's why I didn't get the degree, because it's like I spent $30,000 on a degree that I never received because it was that bad.
Well, I only lasted 1 semester of a master's of teaching, and I thought this is not. Actually, it wasn't the kids that put me off. It was the woke bullshit that put me off. I thought,
that's the new thing now. See, that wasn't so much a problem when I was doing it
anymore.
Yeah, that wasn't as much, or it was starting around the time. But I like some of the kids.
I only did mine in like 2021, something like that. I thought about it, and then I did 1 semester. I got high distinctions in all the subjects, and I left.
For me, this was like 2000, so it was it was a little bit different back then, but not much. It was starting, and I could never survive it today. I've got members of my family who are actively involved in the school system, and I hear their stories, and I'm like, my God, I would be that mean, nasty nun. I would.
I'd be in jail.
But also there is another group that, and I'm going to say something that is really harsh now, okay? And so and I kind of normally I sort of apologize for that. I don't think I want to apologize for this. There are sisters, shall we say, not enclosed nuns, who the church pays for their living, where they live. They have these nice lives. They don't teach anymore. They don't work in hospitals anymore. I'm not sure what the hell they do other than write, crap theology. Are woke as all get up, are always left wing. They always have short haircuts. They're always boomers, if not a little bit younger. And I think, what is the point of you? Like, why should the church pay for you? What now, don't get me wrong. I'm not being utilitarian. I'm glad Paul is laughing, by the way. I'm not being utilitarian. For enclosed nuns, whose entire purpose is to pray for the faithful, that is not a waste of time. I'm not being utilitarian.
No.
That is absolutely faithfully what it is.
Yeah.
But from what I can tell, there's a group of what would have once upon a time been teaching orders of nuns that don't do that, of sisters that don't do that anymore. I'm not sure what they do. I'm not sure what their purpose is. They sit on the boards of dioceses and get in the way of or come up with stupid ideas, and they don't seem to want any masculine people around. They don't really like young men and their ideas because they might like the traditional Latin Mass, for example.
Yeah.
And so so I'm being harsh. But actually, they need to hear this. What is the point of view?
If you are out there, call into the show and let us know, because we want to know the answer to that question.
Doesn't mean I don't think they're loved by God, because they are.
Well, that's a different matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what is it you think you're trying to
because
achieve?
I know what you're talking about. What you're talking about is that the clerical life is a life of service. Mm-hmm. What exactly is your service? What service are you offering by being this?
And they will say, I'm speaking for them. They will say, social justice, we're social justice warriors,
That's not a place for the church.
Their version of social justice is to campaign so that the government does it.
So that's called lobbyist.
That's called being a socialist. That's called the Good Samaritan helped the man directly. He didn't call the authorities to do it.
You see, I have a problem with when church crosses that line into, I guess, what's called social justice. Because I don't see that as, I see that as antithetical to the church. That is not the role of the church. That is not what the church exists for. That is not the role of the church. All right. Because ultimately, the church is about liberation. It is not about creating institutions that make more legislation to control the people you want to control. That is not what the church is about. And to me, that's very antithetical. So I do not agree when churches step. And that's why, look, I know I get a lot of flack for this, but I think my audience at least understands. I hope most of you do anyway. This is why I am politically pro-choice, even though I am exceptionally anti-abortion. But I am pro-choice because I don't want the church involved in matters of social justice. It is not its role. What its role is to teach you how to be a morally responsible person. If everyone lived up to that expectation and did their duty, you wouldn't need social justice. You wouldn't need lobbying. You wouldn't need all of this bullshit. You would just have socially responsible people doing the right thing out of the goodness of their own heart and for their love of God. But that's not what we have. I mean, imagine that.
Yeah, I can imagine it. That's all we're going to have to do.
But that's why I don't, that's the role of the church. The church is to help people to become that. The church is not here to get involved in politics and push agendas. And even the pro-life agenda as morally acceptable as it is from a anti-abortion standpoint, which I agree with, I do not agree with the church stepping over the line into politics at all. And the reason for that is, I wouldn't want someone from another ideology doing it from their religious vantage point controlling me, which I get very upset.
Well, what you're really opposed to is not religious. What you're opposed to is the over-codification of life reflected in state law.
Correct.
And because that can be abused by anybody. I mean, I'm going to give you I'm the same.
I'm going to give you a trivial example.
I was having this conversation yesterday, though. I mean, I was talking to a lot of policemen, right? Yesterday, I was doing this funeral, and afterwards we were having a chat. And I said, we're about to have this ridiculous referendum on a voice to Parliament for Aboriginal people in Australia.
Yeah, you were saying that a couple episodes ago.
And most people do. But I said, if we repealed all of the laws that have been passed since about, 1948, would we notice any bloody difference?
Yeah.
Like people aren't going to suddenly start behaving differently. Right. And that's why, what you're really opposed to is this idea of politics by legislation. It's like, or governments measure their success by how much legislation they got through. I would measure their success by how much they repealed.
How much they got rid of. Yeah. How much they eliminated. I mean, I'll give you another example. Yeah. It's a trivial one, but it's one that, it tells the point. I'm a Catholic. Okay. Sundays are for drinking. I mean, you're off. You've celebrated the resurrection of Christ. You go home. You have a nice
feast day.
It's a feast day. You're supposed to feast, and that includes alcoholic beverages. But here in the state of Georgia, up until very recently, you could not buy alcohol on Sundays.
Right.
It should have been Fridays. You couldn't buy it.
I know, right? But you couldn't do it because the churches lobbied, and they have so much weight, and they didn't want other people buying alcohol on their holy day. But that's not your responsibility. You do your own thing. You don't have to go to the store and buy it. But I'm not part of your little thing. So to make it even worse, I wouldn't want some Muslim legislator coming in with some Sharia law interpretation and enforcing that shit on me either.
They've tried it.
I know. And that's exactly why, as a Christian, as a Catholic, I would not want to impose my will of making abortion illegal. Even though I would love for it to not exist, I do not feel that I should use my church and my faith as a means, as a weapon against your ideology.
At the same time, I couldn't absolve an abortion doctor who was going to carry on working.
Yeah.
So I can't.
Right.
So in other words, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, but your job is incompatible with the Catholic faith, so you've got to make a choice.
Yeah, make a choice. And that's a different matter, because now you're talking about dealing with it at the level that the church is responsible for.
Well, and we're also dealing with choice, whereas the law doesn't give anyone a choice.
And that's freedom. You're right. It's another expression of freedom, not control. But see, these nuns you're talking about, social justice is about control. So social justice warriors are about control. Mm-hmm. They want to push their agenda. They want to upset the system. They want to switch the authority around. It's like, we don't want you to have the control. We want to have the control.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I will not support it, which is why I'm against protests. I'm against that kind of, demonstrations in the street. I'm against all of that bullshit for this very reason. It's all about control. Control yourself.
Laws against people praying silently outside abortion centers are also evil. Of
course. Because, if it's public property...
In my home country, that's what they have.
I know.
They have that law.
I've seen that.
Mercifully, the woman that was arrested for that, I think it's like 2 years later, has in fact had the charges dropped.
Wow.
It took 2 years...
I will say this,
and I don't know on what basis, other than that it doesn't pass the pub test. But I don't know what legal basis to drop the charges, because technically she breached what is, I believe, an immoral law.
I agree with you that it's an immoral law. I don't think it should be a law, but I would say it's extremely bad form to do it. You don't need to make a spectacle of your prayer. You can absolutely pray for all of the aborted souls in the comfort of your own home, at church, at mass, whatever. You don't need to go there and make a spectacle to make people feel more uncomfortable. So I do have a problem with that.
People are free to be dickheads. That's all right.
And of course, and that's what I'm getting at. I'm not. Yeah. I'm against the legislation, but morally, as if I were her pastor, I'd be telling her to stay the hell home. You're giving a bad name to all of us by making a spectacle of your prayers. You don't need to be showing people that you're doing this. You can do this, and if it's really about the lost souls, then you can do that from home. You don't need to be out there creating a spectacle. But I agree with you. There shouldn't be a law to stop it. I mean, you're right. We should be free to be dickheads if we want to be. Yeah, it is ridiculous. All right. Any other questions, Brandon? Father Chris, you haven't any up there right now?
There was one from Not Sure.
Yeah, it's a good one, too.
He asked, how does one properly use a candle for prayers? Does it need to be dressed or blessed? Is it best to write intention or say it out loud?
Okay, so let's start with the first one. It does not need to be dressed, but it should be blessed, although that's not necessary. And actually, this is one of those things where you can actually bless a candle through your own prayers if you're using it for like personal use. You wouldn't be able to do it in a liturgical sense. A priest would need to bless a liturgical candle in a particular way, but as a act of devotion in a personal devotion setting, like at home, you could ask for God's blessing upon that candle and light it with that intention that you have in mind. As far as the type of prayer, that's whatever you're most comfortable with. So, I mean, personally, I like a combination of both. So I like doing verbal prayers and then taking moments of silence between them. So I kind of use both. I don't really, and I'm formulaic in my prayers. I try to limit my conversational prayers because it tends to me just, becoming whiny with God, and I don't like that. So the easiest way for me to not fall into the trap of whining at God, because that's so easy to do when you turn it into a informal conversation, is to simply stick to the formulas and to be mindful of the mysteries and to make that your prayer. So for me, the highest form of prayer is not asking for things or lighting candles with intentions, although those are all fine devotions to do. The best prayer is honestly, for me, in my opinion, is adoration. Yes, is to just bask in the presence of God, knowing the presence of God is there. And if lighting a candle helps to focus your mind, or to focus the intention, to maybe pray that God helps you with that realization, then that's the best intention you could use a candle for. But if you want to burn it for someone or for something, I mean, that's perfectly fine. What I'd suggest is, there are two nice traditions though we should talk about. First of all, and again, I know it depends on you having access to not only Catholic or Anglican or Orthodox churches, but Orthodox always do, but the former being a bit more traditional. On Candlemas, the Feast of the Presentation every year, what should happen is all of the candles that are going to be used in the course of the year by the church are blessed, other than the Easter candle, which is blessed separately. And so you can have candles blessed there once a year, or you can also buy a pack of candles. I actually prefer the Orthodox ones, the beeswax long ones. Just buy a load, take them down to church, ask the priest to bless them. Yeah, you can do that too.
It's a good thing to do. You don't have to do it.
I think Not Sure is far from any church that would do that. So I think that might be his issue. But
you might be able to buy them blessed, actually. Orthodox ones, you might be able to, you're not buying the blessing, you're buying the candles, but they're already blessed.
I think what they do is like a standing donation kind of thing. Yeah.
And through you.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, if you wanted to send a box of candles to this church, we can definitely bless them and send them back to you, provided that, you're willing to
cover the cost,
cover the cost and wait, because it can sometimes be a while. We don't get down there to the box maybe
about
once a month. So we don't really see mail because there's not much that comes in. If we went there all the time, we would be going there for nothing most of the time. So we'd sort of let it build up for about 30 days and then go and get what's there, which is usually not much. And that's why. So if you're okay with waiting, then that's something that you could do as well. We can definitely, and you can even watch us do it, because typically when we get objects blessed, we'll do it at Mass. And if you watch the live Masses, you can actually see your item that you send us get blessed in live on YouTube. So that's something that might, give you or serve some kind of personal connection, I think, to it.
Mystic has a follow-up on that. Might be good to address.
Sure.
She says she makes her own candles. Should I do the same thing when making them for prayer use? And does it matter if it's beeswax or not? Beeswax
is preferred. In certain cases, it's necessary. Like the Easter candle has to have a certain ratio of beeswax in it. They can be very expensive.
Because the prayer says the work of Mother Bee.
Yeah, Mother Bee, it does.
Because I always thought, if it's a bright white candle, should you say the work of some old nag?
The work of synthetic hands. The work of robotic industrialization.
The work of a former racehorse.
It's true. It's true. But yeah, I mean, I would use beeswax. And yes, if you make your own candles, that's a wonderful thing to do, and certainly adds to the personal nature of the devotion, but you can even send those to us if you want a more formal prayer or blessing attached to it. Remember, you can always ask God to bless anything that's for personal use. You don't do the blessing. You're basically asking God to bless it, in lieu of being able to get to a priest if you're in a situation where that would cause an undue hardship. But you can
bless your own home, you can bless your own children.
Yep.
Like this is the context is about your sphere of ownership.
Yeah,
I mean,
because you are part of the priesthood of believers, and your jurisdiction is your home and family, your immediate family that you care for. And as the head of household, you have that spiritual responsibility in the same way that a priest has a responsibility over his parish, or a bishop has a responsibility over his diocese, or a pope or patriarch has a responsibility over the entirety of his church. So that's kind of how it works. I think that is a good.
That's a very good point right there, because I've been asked when we go on private investigations, people call it to us. I've been asked, well, why can't you pray over their house?
It's not your jurisdiction, right?
It's not yours. Yeah, they can,
but they can, and you can teach them how.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's
even when we go to exercise places.
Yeah.
If it's somebody's house, it begins in the main room of the house, like the living area of the house, and it involves the homeowner being present, and in a sense, they don't have to authorize the prayers that the church offers through the priest, but they're taking ownership of what they want to intend for their own property. It's an integral part of that celebration. You can't do it without the homeowner there, really.
That's true. And you shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't even try. And certain cases, sometimes that's not always possible, and we try to leave a blessing.
Or the tenant. If you're the tenant, it's yours.
Yeah, the tenant, because that counts as your sphere of domesticity, I guess you could say. But I mean, what you as a lay person can confer on your jurisdiction, your personal sphere of influence, is still different though than a sacramental blessing given by a priest or a bishop. So preferably you still want to go and try to secure that either through us or through your local church, which hopefully you can attend. I mean, one of the reasons why we offer an online streaming mass, despite the fact that it might seem to some to be almost pointless when you can't receive the sacraments through it, so why bother? It must be understood that if a person cannot, because they live too far away, or there's some reason why they can't get to their church, merely attending virtually is a type of grace. It's not going to be a replacement for receiving the Eucharist, just like spiritual communion is not a replacement for the Eucharist. But these are things that we can do to cultivate grace, which are exceptionally helpful in a multitude of spiritual situations. They're not replacements, though. Then they're definitely not excuses for not going. You can't be like, oh, well, Bishop Bryan offers the Mass live every week. I'm just going to watch that from the comfort of my home. I don't want to have to go to some church somewhere. That's not... You're using it the wrong way if that's your motivation. Hopefully, those of you who do have access to churches are going to your churches to receive the sacraments and then getting extra nourishment through us. So, you either, tuning in to just be able to pray with us, be a part of our community, listen to the sermon, that kind of thing. But there is grace for those of you who might be homebound because you can't get out of bed, or, the closest Catholic church is 2 hours away. And we definitely have some members where that applies, and there are special graces for you. But there is no grace if you're making an excuse and using the live Mass as an excuse. So, you need to make an effort to go. Okay, you need to make an effort to be part of the church. And if you don't like the way the church is, then that's all more of a reason why you need to be there. Because the reason why churches are filled with so many nasty sons of bitches is because you good people leave. Don't leave. Can't throw them out.
Yeah, it's true.
It is true.
It's so true.
Yeah. It drives all the good people off. So you got to stand your ground and make a difference. You have to. I mean, that's
it's
part
also
of the
why
obligation.
sometimes if people are listening to this thinking, actually, my parish priest is sometimes a son of a bitch and horrible to me.
Yeah.
Maybe you're the problem. Maybe it's because you're actually keeping people out, you know?
Yeah.
And maybe the pastor knows that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true.
So listen.
And I understand. Look, I get it because I was there. It drove me off, you know. But I found a solution, and this is my solution. The solution was the ISM. It's like, well, if I can't if I can't deal with all these Georgia churches, I'm just gonna go and run my own. And that's kind of how it evolved, you know. And not really, but it was definitely one of the thoughts that I had. It's like there has to be a better way. There has to be a way to bring the essence of early Christianity back to Christianity, because I feel like we've lost that in modernity. We really have. And I would go to these churches and it's like watching people worship idols.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the icons. I'm not talking about the statues. You know, I'm talking about people with their beliefs about God. It's very disturbing to watch. You know, I was on a podcast today, which will, I think, air next week on Wednesday or Thursday, so I'll watch my social media, so you can watch it. But I've been on the show before. It's I think it's called Simply Pointless, if I remember correctly. But he said he won the award for the most watched podcast. He has 150,000 listeners.
That's pretty cool.
So it's great to be on his show, and then he calls me back for it every now and then. And he asked me about, you know, these things, the exorcism and everything else. And we started talking about it. And I said, you know, he asked me if I've ever been in a situation where I was afraid of, you know, something I saw in the work. And I said,
we know that answer.
I said, no, not at all. But I said, I'll tell you what does scare me. It's like just watching people live their lives. That's really terrifying.
Or refusing to live their lives.
Yes. I mean, it is. It's because, you know, what scares me about it is that it's like I've become, I think, through this works, I think pastoral ministry does this to you too. But when you combine it with paranormal investigation, it sort of really compounds. I've just become so empathic that I can get myself into situations where I'm talking with someone who's living an absolutely horrific life, and I start feeling, I say, oh my God, I feel trapped like they do, and I feel like there's no point in living like they do, and it's like it really starts to affect me emotionally, and I have to pull myself out of it. You know, and I think this is what happens with people in this work too. You know, one of the biggest criticisms I hear about Ghost Adventures is that Zach Bagans, and I did tell him that I would mention this the next time there was an appropriate reason to defend him on this, and I think now's a good time to do it. Because we talked about this, actually. We had a long conversation about this. One of the biggest criticisms that he gets and the show gets as a result of it is that everyone's saying every episode he's possessed. Hey, he's always possessed.
It's not possession.
And first of all, it's not possession. He doesn't even claim it's. He might have misused that word once in one of the early seasons before we were involved with the show. That might have happened. I think I remember that. I think even was back when Nick was on. So it was a really long time ago. I think it came up, and for some reason the audience just locked onto that, so that now every time Zach has an empathic response to the situation, which is a natural, regular result to be expected in this work when you're doing it for real, this does indeed happen to you. And he has reached a point where he's completely at the mercy of it when it happens. He's just gone so far in, and he feels it. And I saw it for the first time in the episode we just filmed that has not aired yet. And you'll probably see the moment, okay? And of course, I'm sure he's going to get more criticism for it because those people aren't listening to this show and hearing this right now when they should be, but they're not.
Yeah, I saw it too.
Yeah, but I mean, this was the thing. It's like we were dealing with a situation. I can't give it detail, but I'll tell you this much, okay? Where he started to respond to it. He started to react. And I went over to him I actually left the client, and I said, Jamie, stay with the client. I'm going to go make sure Zach's okay. And I went over there, and I blessed him, and I threw holy water on him, and he just stayed stoic there with almost like a childlike innocent grin on his face, not a devious one, sort of like a state of almost like hypnotic wonder. And there was no reaction to the holy water at all. Whereas usually when a person is under the influence, if they are truly possessed by something malevolent that's in the area, they're going to respond to it. So if something was jumping to him, he would have reacted negatively. He would have, in fact, Jamie's got a little story she can tell you that happened this a couple days ago with this very thing. We'll save some time for that. But I saw it with my own eyes. Okay, I went up and there was no reaction, which told me everything I ever wanted to know about this. That when fans are saying, "Oh, he's getting possessed every episode," no, he's not, and he doesn't think he is either. By the way, he's become that empathic. And I know that's hard for people who have no sense of empathy to understand. But when you do this work for the right reasons, and you can criticize Zach and think that he does all these things and he's got all these other ulterior motives. I don't really care what you think. Okay, you're not there. I am. Right? You don't know him. I do. Okay, so I'm going to trust my own experiences with him over your opinion. That really is not an opinion, because I personally don't think everyone's entitled to an opinion. I think everyone's entitled to an educated opinion. And if you don't have the means of having an educated opinion, you need to shut the fuck up, okay? You really do. I mean, that's based reality as far as I'm concerned. You're entitled to an educated opinion, so you need to educate yourself. You can't do it in the situation because you're never going to be there with him like I am and seeing it firsthand like I have. He's not getting possessed. He doesn't think he's being possessed, but he is absolutely empathic. And it's very, very hard for someone with that level of openness, almost childlike openness. There's a childlike nature to Zach Bagans, which is, I think, something that people don't quite understand. They think he's overacting. They think it's some kind of melodrama. They think he's just being ridiculous. But it really is this almost innocent side to him, which I think he tries to counter with his almost. I don't want to really say obsessiveness with dark things, but it's definitely an area of focus. I think the way he balances himself out is by having a foot in both worlds. I really do. There's an interesting moment that happens on this show, a couple of them actually relating to this. I'm not going to go into those details. You'll have to watch it when it comes out. But once it comes out, we'll talk more about that. But I wanted to say that because empathy is a real thing here. And I've felt it. I've been in those situations where it's easier to just lock yourself away. And I think, honestly, when Jamie and I talk about paranormal withdrawal, paranormal hangover. It's hangover. What it is, it's not like all this negative evil energy just wearing you out and like feeding off of you. That's not what it is. It's that you've opened yourself up so much to these energies and interacted with these very powerful forces to a degree that it's exhausting emotionally to feel the pain and suffering of a client, to have to be there with them in that moment. And I do that. I get into ask anybody that there's people in this audience right now, probably not in the chat room, but there's people in this audience right now that have absolutely had my services, and they know, they can tell you, I go into you. I don't merely just pray over you. I don't merely just ask God for your good. I do all those things, but I go in, all right? When I put my hands on you, on your head, usually, I use that as a means to actually enter in there and push out the darkness. That takes an exceptional amount of energy and empathy to do. And this is what makes me very successful at the work, though. And you've seen me do it on the TV. You've seen it at Sin City Exorcism. You've seen it in all of them, really, where I had to do something with a client. that's what I'm doing. When you see me cover their head in the stole and completely encapsulate them with, I'm literally taking over and pushing all of that out and replacing it with the love of Christ. And that's how it's done. That's real exorcism, folks. That's the real thing. But Zach, he's done this for a long time, and he's opened up. Why don't you tell them about your story that happened a couple days ago? I thought that was very interesting.
Well, I'll keep it brief. So I was helping a friend move, and they sent a couple of movers, and two young men, very nice. Well, they were finishing up. We were doing some paperwork at a kitchen table, and I noticed a few tattoos on the guy. I have tattoos, so I naturally, look at people's tattoos and ask them about it, because some of the stories are fascinating. Well, the first thing I noticed was he had the Seal of Solomon with the Ouroboros surrounding it, and then near his wrist he had the Sigil of Lucifer. On the other arm he had the Leviathan cross, which is also known as the Satan's cross, or it can also be an alchemic symbol for black sulfur. Well, I asked him about that. I said, hey, what's up with the tattoos? Those are some pretty powerful sigils. And he tried to blow me off and say, I have a thirst for knowledge. And I said, okay, well, do you know what knowledge you're seeking? Because I know what those are. And I said, especially you've got, the Seal of Solomon with the Ouroboros. I said, I noticed the Leviathan's cross. He goes, oh, no, that's black sulfur. I said, well, it might be black sulfur if you didn't have the Sigil of Lucifer on your other wrist. And he looked at me like, oh, wow, you kind of know what you're talking about. I'm like, yeah. I said, so what's up? And he's like, well, to be honest, when I was younger, he's 28 now. He's still young. But I guess he was bullied in school, and he said that he had wanted to find the knowledge of life and was just trying to be a part of something. So he started getting involved with the Luciferian movement and started doing some incantations. And he said that it actually kind of backfired on him, and now he was struggling with trying to find his faith again. And I said, well, are you baptized? And he said, no. I said, well, I know a guy, if you're serious about wanting to come back. And he admitted to me that he had done some invocation, and that part of the requirement was to renounce Christ. And I said, well, Satan can't take what's not his. You can come back if you're sincere. And he's like, well, I've been seeing things and I've had anger moments. And I said, well, tell you what, I've got some holy water in the car. I said, I can't bless you because I'm not a priest, but I can douse you with holy water and say a prayer with you. And he goes, oh yeah, I'd like that very much. So I go to the truck. I always keep holy water in the truck because you never know, right? So I come over, splash him pretty good, put my hand on his shoulder, and I recite the St. Michael's prayer. Well, he went from smiling at me and looking at me intently to the look. And the look, the bishop and I know, and probably Father Chris as well, when someone has an attachment and it's a dark one, and when you start to pray over them and with them, and they see your light, they will stare at you in the most vile hatred that you can imagine. They try to look through your soul, and I saw that. And I've only seen it in people that have legitimate dark attachments. So it's
actually one of the things we look for to
right, it is, absolutely.
Genuine,
that's why when you see me on TV, I'm usually right in their face because I'm looking for that. No, you can't fake it. It's a feeling, it's a sight. And so it's something you can't fake. So I saw that, and so I completed the prayer, and I knew I wasn't authorized to engage, so I did not. I just said, remember, and I gave his name, the kid's name. I said, hey, just remember, you're in charge. And I said, dude, you do have an attachment, but we can help you, but that's up to you. And I said, do you remember? I said, do you remember staring at me a minute ago? And he goes, no, I don't remember anything. He goes, I feel kind of funny. I feel kind of tingly. I said, you don't remember staring at me and not blinking? He goes, no, not at all. So one of those chance encounters. So we exchanged numbers, and hopefully he'll call. Because he was really struggling. We would have sat there and talked all night, but it was getting late and cold and everybody was tired. But you just never know when you're going to come up to something that's authentic like that. So hopefully we'll be able to help this guy in the future. It was strange.
That's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. Do we have a few more minutes here? We can probably take a couple more questions. Any other ones that you've seen, Brandon, Father Chris?
I'm looking through too.
No questions, no.
Okay. Well, I guess it's a quiet audience tonight. We're just.
Well, I was just helping out. Not sure with finding a church.
Okay.
Something that people should know about. We talk a lot about the Orthodox Church as well, and one of the major differences with the Orthodox Church is that they will not knock on your door. they will not invite you to their church. This is not because they're not wonderful, because they are. It's because they're underpinning. I mean, I happen to think they're probably the true church, but the underpinning ecclesiology that goes with that churchmanship that goes with being Orthodox is that they're waiting for the Holy Spirit to bring people to them. Mm-hmm. So now we can criticize it. I think they've probably gone a bit too far the other way, right? But
I would say they have gone too far. But go ahead, and I'll qualify it when you're done.
So, but all I was going to say was, very often there are Orthodox churches near you that you might have absolutely no idea exist. And so, if you think, and especially in America where being Catholic is more difficult in the South. The Orthodox fly under the radar because evangelicals don't hate Orthodox Christians. So partly because they don't understand anything about them. And so often
they would hate them if they knew more about them.
That is true.
Yeah.
But I did manage to find one that's relatively close to where Not Sure is.
Oh, good.
So that's just one example.
I will say with my experience with Orthodox churches, which is of course limited regionally to here. Well, to a certain extent, I know Vegas too, but Eastern churches anyway. But the one thing that I will say can be off-putting, and for those of you out there that might be interested in looking into it, be prepared to expect it. Orthodox churches are very ethnic conscious in whatever particular ethnicity that particular form of Orthodoxy belongs to. So if it's Russian Orthodox,
and that can be very difficult.
It's almost impossible to overcome. In fact, I would say that those that convert in will never be received the same way as cradle in Orthodoxy. No. Where that does not exist in Catholicism at all. I will say in Catholicism, they do not do that there. But
it's better to be an imperfect member of an Orthodox church than a member of nothing.
Well, I guess there's something to be said for that. But I would say that, I remember, I'll give you a couple examples. One was, when Tracy and I were looking, we were part of the Eastern Catholic churches here because they were the only ones that were really tolerable, but there were problems, and we wanted to start exploring Orthodoxy. And so we started with the Russian Orthodox Church, and we went to, I'm not going to name names, but we went to one of them, and we had been going, and my wife had been baptized in the Ruthenian Catholic Church, which is a sort of a Eastern variation of Russian Orthodoxy. One of the variations of Russian Orthodoxy, but it's Eastern, right? And so she was baptized, confirmed, received First Eucharist, and we were married there too. We had our marriage sacramentalized in that tradition, in that rite, in the Ruthenian rite. So when we started exploring out and went to the Russian Orthodox Church, I really thought it was going to be received well. I didn't think it would be like they would be like, "Oh, how wonderful that you've been Catholic." I knew that they weren't that crazy about Catholics, but I thought that they would be enthralled with the idea that here are these Ruthenian Catholics coming to Orthodoxy, and being interested.
They see them as worse.
They did. And when we sat down and we didn't sit down because this was a true Russian church where you stood the whole time. There were no pews. And when the priest came out to give the sermon, he comes out to the middle of the church and everyone sits on the floor. There's just a few seats on the side for people with disabilities, but for the most part, everyone sits on the floor like your children. It's really kind of kind of an endearing thing, honestly. But anyway,
we just stand up.
Yeah, I mean, you can stand, but I mean, it was just one thing that they did at this particular Russian Orthodox church. But anyway, so after liturgy, divine liturgy, people were interested. Who was these new people and all this stuff? Of course, we had already introduced ourselves to the pastor and had lunch with him, so he knew us and knew to expect us and everything else. But the rest of the congregation didn't know. And so one of them comes over to me and says, so where have you been going? And I said, we're Ruthenian Catholics over at the Ruthenian Catholic Church. And he looks at me and this look of absolute disgust on his face, and he goes, "Uniats," and walks away.
Uniats.
Yeah. Which uniats is a derogatory term the Orthodox have towards Eastern Catholics because they see them as traitors.
Wow.
But uniats meaning you unified with the evil Pope.
With Rome.
Yeah, with Rome. So that was one experience. The other experience was with the Greek Orthodox. They're much more friendly, but you're really on your own there. It's like, you go in and there's not a whole lot of people that are there to come to you. So I would honestly say the most comfortable experience is really going to a Roman Catholic church because everyone kind of leaves you alone. You go in, they don't really, if you're going to a really small parish, there might be some of this and that, but for the most part, if you go to a large, like if you go to the cathedral in the diocese, you're going to be practically invisible. You're going to go in and go out, and no one's even going to probably approach you, which might be to some people a more comfortable way of getting used to it before you make the move towards conversion or even becoming a regular member or attending. But those are things to be mindful of. Don't let the intimidation factor scare you. Always, though, I'd say always reach out to the pastor before you go. I would just say, I'd like to make an appointment with you if it's possible, if you have the time. I'm interested in your church. I'm interested in Catholicism. I'm interested in Orthodoxy, whatever the case is. And, I'd like to talk to you to find out more about it, and maybe, even talk about what's involved in attending or converting. And believe me, that will be received very well. Just be prepared. Congregation might not be as happy about it as the pastor. Okay. Anyway, we're at the end of the show, and next week we've got a new series starting up. It's going to be a 2-part series. Okay. Next week is going to be Michael Van Owen returning to talk about communicating with the archetypes through tarot. And then the following week, we're going to have a brand new guest, James Ferreira, on, who works in the movie industry, somebody, a good friend of ours, and is we worked with the Conjuring 3 film together. And he will be also talking about his experience and journey into the tarot. He actually has a tarot podcast. We'll talk all about that on that episode, so you don't want to miss any of these. It's going to be very interesting. And that's it. All right. Thank you so much thank you, Father Chris. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Jamie.
All right. Take care, everybody.
So until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless.